Strategy. 7th floor.
We'll see you around the timeline. Feels good to be back.
I think The Rollup is one of the most premier media brands in crypto, and Andy and Robbie are great experts at everything they talk about, and it's my favorite podcast.
Adding it to my library as we speak.
Potentially multi-chain deployments.
We are at DevConnect Day 1 here. I'm with Jesse from Base. JP Morgan, BlackRock, DTCC, Fidelity, the entire thing was just institutions. It's next level. This industry is going to the next level. And guys, I don't know what else to say. I'm bullish.
He said it, he finally said it.
I'm so bullish.
Andy's bullish, I'm bullish, we're bullish. We're going to the top.
We're going.
Rollup is my favorite.
From all walks of life, all over the world, all over this industry, come together for the roll-up.
The institutions aren't coming, they're simply here. It's the golden age of crypto, guys. Get right, let's go.
Welcome to the nest. See you on the show. And we are live. Welcome to Virtual NEAR Day, guys. NEAR is our exclusive AI partner here at The Rollup. It is July 16th, and we've got a fantastic show for you guys today. We're doing a bit of a stream takeover today. You can see up in the top corner, this side over here, powered by NEAR. That's what we have going on. Powered by NEAR today. our exclusive AI partner, obviously leading on the Intense front and the AI front, guys. I'm excited. Been planning this for a long time, and it's finally here. And so we've got a fantastic speaker lineup for you guys today. You guys heard from Alex Shevchenko yesterday, and he is the co-founder of NEAR Intense. NEAR is bouncing off the intraday lows. We had a bit of a neutral morning, and now we are looking at what is going to happen the rest of the day. Appreciate you guys rocking with us. We're going to get into everything that we have going on. Hit us up in the chat. We've got a tremendous lineup. As I said, we're going to start off with Matt Henderson. He's going to be talking about the app that ate the stack. These apps are eating. And we're going to follow that up with Harshit of NEAR Intense. Hugo, KyberSwap, Felix. We got a whole virtual conference for you guys here today. So it's going to be an exciting time. We've got keynotes. We've got panels. We're going to keep it spicy. We're going to get debates going. We're going to have a great time. We're going to be chatting about apps. We're going to be chatting about Intense. We're going to be chatting about NEAR AI. We're going to be chatting about confidentiality. You guys heard about Alex and his confidential intent story yesterday. I mean, also, you guys probably heard there was a guy in the NEAR community that made a rap song for us. So we're having a lot of fun. We have been big proponents of NEAR. Remember, NEAR is 1/3 of the three-headed dragon. There's sort of this, I hesitate to call it a narrative. It feels more like this paradigm shift towards fundamental and a return to the cypherpunk ethos of the space. And so we've obviously seen what happened, to Bitcoin with its ETFs, with MicroStrategy. It's become a bit institutionalized. All of this has been taking place. But there are projects, companies, coins, networks that have actually embraced what the spirit of the space is, what it's always been. And I like NEAR because I consider it one of those companies. It's very, very cool to see what they've done. NEAR Intense has done over $23 billion. There's a couple of dashboards that I like to point to. I also, before we get started here, I want to pull up, and I don't think we're going to get it up on the screen, but I saw a dashboard not long ago around NEAR, the buybacks that are happening. They posted kind of this NEAR tokenomics sort of dashboard, which I found very compelling. I think it was very, very cool to see. I think more projects and companies are headed in this direction. We also heard from Alex Shevchenko that they are doing what they can to reduce the inflation. And so I think all of these things, if you look at the real company, yes, so this is what I was looking for. Look at the key metrics. The expanded NEAR revenue dashboard is now live. And I want to just call out a couple of these things from the NEAR revenue dashboard. This is at revenue.near.org. They are closing in on $40 million of revenue. This is updating in real time. And so intent volume is upwards of 23 billion. Confidential TVL is at 33 million. Unique users over the last 30 days, 550,000. Monthly net revenue is closing in. Let's see. Monthly revenue, 253,000. Revenue as percent of NEAR emissions is around 10%. So very, very cool to see all of the revenue that's taking place. As crypto becomes a little bit more legitimized, we're seeing it enter into the more robust it's really treated as a real asset class, right? And before, I think we could kind of get away with these, network state Jevons paradox compounding effects, and this was going to take us to Valhalla, but it turns out these are companies just like all the other companies that are out there. They should be valued as such. And so that means we're going to look at their revenue. We're going to look at how durable their sales are. How durable is that revenue? What is the market cap to revenue ratios? We're going to be analyzing all this because at the end of the day, these are real companies and they're going to be valued as such. Shout out to the guys in the chat rocking with us. Synchropath, Ashraf, future is near. It certainly is. So we called out some of the intense volume metrics. We called out some of the revenue metrics. I think it's about time that we get into our content, for the day. Our first guest is going to join us in the back room any minute. Our first guest today is Matt Henderson. We're going to do our best to stay on track here. I think we've got about 15 minutes or so, about 20 minutes. So, and then we're going to get into our panels. But first, we've got a fireside with Matt Henderson. He's a builder in the NEAR.com ecosystem. NEAR.com obviously is this combination of several facets. They've gone and I think taken a path that a lot of projects are now coming around to, where you've sort of got this disparate ecosystem of apps and projects. Everything's very decentralized, and this decentralization kumbaya. What I think NEAR has done is they've taken a very practical approach to verticalization. They've said, look, we're going to bring these things under one roof. It makes sense to have an intense protocol right next to an AI protocol. We're going to see why over the coming years, why this makes more and more sense. I anticipate more projects are going to come to this realization, and they're going to start to unify a lot of these user experiences to ultimately provide the best user experience for the consumer. So you guys heard, 23 billion plus in intense volume on NEAR Intense. That is getting over to NEAR.com. And then you've got all the great things around AI, agentic economy, agentic commerce that are happening on NEAR.com as well. Truly competing on both the financial side as well as the frontier technological side with respect to AI. Our first guest, Matt Henderson, I can see him in the back. We're going to bring him up on the show. I think it's his first time on the show. Matt, it's a pleasure to welcome you. You are our first guest for Virtual NEAR Day. How you feeling?
Good. Glad to be here. Very happy to be here.
Absolutely, man. Well, it's a pleasure to have you. I think it is your first time on the show. We're going to be talking about the app that ate the stack, meet NEAR.com. You're a builder in the NEAR ecosystem. Because it is your first time on the show, I'd love to, just understand a little bit more about you, and how you ended up getting involved with the NEAR ecosystem.
Okay, yeah, that's a story that goes way back. So many years ago, back around 2010 or something, I was running a product agency, and I hired a couple of very young Finnish brothers, and one of them was a deep cypherpunk, and he was one of the first 1,000 Bitcoin miners, and he was trying to encourage me to mine Bitcoin, but he was also developing his own floating country protected by autonomous weaponized drones. So I didn't tend to listen to much to what he was into. But yeah, a few years later, he kept on, and we had some remote people working for us, and so they wanted to be paid in Bitcoin. So that kind of got me more interested in Bitcoin. And then in the DeFi summer of 2020, that's where everything just kind of I just went into the rabbit hole, seeing Ethereum and smart contract platforms coming out, and seeing that an entire permissionless financial world can be built on them. And that same Bitcoin miner, he went to work for NEAR, and he invited me to join him. And we were working on a project called Aurora, which is it's like a blockchain implemented, an EVM blockchain implemented as a smart contract on NEAR. So that was really cool. And that's how I got into the NEAR ecosystem. Once that project was up and running, I left kind of to do my own things. But when I saw NEAR Intense coming out, I contacted Alex Shevchenko, our old CEO from Aurora, and we were talking that there's really a possibility that the technology is right now to build a retail app that's kind of category defining. And so that's how I ended up back here.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about the stats that NEAR Intense has been able to rack up to this point: $23 billion in volume. I think upwards of 40 million or so in fees and monetization and revenue. 500,000 users. The numbers go on, and we've seen the chain, the cross-chain ecosystem, the bridge ecosystem evolve for a long time. But this feels like you guys have been able to crack this thing and unlock ecosystems that. Previously were walled gardens. Zcash is, obviously the name that comes to mind there. We had Alex Shevchenko on the show yesterday, and so we got really, really deep in this. Matt, what I'd like to chat with you about today is how you're bringing this into the fold, because near.com is sort of this, overarching umbrella container for several different things. Near Intense obviously plays a very significant role in that, but maybe you could talk to us about how Near Intense interacts with some of the other components around near.com, and ultimately what is the vision for this, all-encompassing platform that involves, AI, Near Intense. Could you just give us sort of the overarching view of near.com and how Near Intense fits in?
Yeah, so the vision for near.com is, well, we kind of feel like the term crypto, or we're kind of in a transition phase where crypto as a term might be fading a bit into the background, just kind of the same way that no one says, we're an internet company anymore. Like all companies are internet companies. So it feels like that kind of the blockchain world and the financial world are merging, and very well integrated to enable this kind of application to come out. So yeah, in near.com, our vision is one financial app that you want to live in. And so we kind of think of eating the stack in this way, is kind of deleting various stacks of friction in your life. So whether that's swapping, so in near.com, since we're built on Near Intense, you just see all of your assets in one place, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's ZC, whether it's USDC. You don't really care what chain they came from. It's just all there together. And in the future, we'll be having real world assets, ETFs, stocks, bank accounts, and it will begin to just, you won't really know if you're dealing with a crypto app or a real world, financial app.
Yeah, it is pretty incredible to see the rise of tokenized stocks, stock tokens. We've seen Robinhood Chain. We've seen how, Near Intense can help unlock these ecosystems. I was chatting with someone that was representing Robinhood Chain, and they talked about this mechanism where, obviously there's a lot of equities on Robinhood, and they're able to just sort of drip out these tokenized stock versions of that when someone submits an order. And I could really see a vision where, Near Intense helps bring those equities that may result, or excuse me, they may originate on something like a Robinhood chain because of the proximity to the broker, but Near Intense is sort of the pathway or the mechanism, that the vehicle that brings these things and proliferates them all across the on-chain ecosystem, which is a very, very powerful tool because it's able to take these assets exactly where they want to go. But as you're talking about, all of this can live in the near.com interface. And so maybe you could just, obviously I think the thing that people are most familiar with is going to be buying, selling, swapping, via Near Intense. I've started to play around a little bit with the Near AI. I think even before it got subsumed into the near.com interface. Could you just, maybe start to tell us about what some of the features, some of the capabilities are on near.com as it pertains to AI, and how you foresee the agentic economy progressing in this regard?
Yeah. Well, right now we don't have AI features in the application because we are doing a lot of thinking about how to best integrate them, and I think it's very difficult because this is obviously a technology that's going to change everything, but it's very difficult to look into the future and say, what is that going to look like? And so we're trying to take some of our own experiences. For example, everyone in the team are using AI agents on their own now. And I can give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, I was out on a bike ride, and I realized I needed a charger for my iPhone. And so I just pulled off the road, and I had built a skill for my agent to do shopping online at Amazon. And so I just told it, I said, hey, I need a charger for my bike. I need, it's got to be thin because it's got to fit into this bag. I sent it a little photo of the bag it's got to fit in. I said, I don't want a cheap off-brand. I don't want it to explode while I'm riding. And it went off. It found some products. It couldn't determine which was the best one just from Amazon. And so it went off and researched it. And it finally came back and said, I recommend this one. And I said, okay, order it. And it said, all right, it's ordered. Your email is on the way. And so that was really a magical moment. I didn't think I'm using AI. I just thought I'm I'm expressing what I want to do, and this thing has, I don't even know what systems it's interacting with. So we're really thinking about AI in terms of how would you want to interact with a financial account when there is intelligence there. So that's, without giving too much away about what we're thinking, that's the direction we're headed. So it would be much more than just like a chat bot that we would add to the application. We really want it to be able to do things on your behalf. We want to integrate long-term investing into the application, and there's a lot of education around that. There's a lot of automation around that that having intelligence can do for us.
Yeah. And this is sort of this pendulum approach where, there's so many elements, and education is part of this. And you mentioned so many different use cases here, but simplicity is one of the things that we've continued to lack when it comes to, these on-chain applications. And the thing that you guys have been able to do, and I think part of the reason for the success of Near Intense so far has been because of its simplicity. So, given that you want to tie in several of these different features, to build something not only that goes across chains as Near Intense does, but also, is capable of tailoring itself to different time horizons. As you mentioned, people might want to buy and hold versus others that might want to trade more frequently. How do you embed simplicity and keep that in mind as you're building out such a varied feature set?
I think it's very difficult for builders in our space to get to that level of simplicity, because it's very hard for us to deeply have empathy for the audience that we're building for, which is not necessarily the audience that is here today. I think us in the crypto space as an audience, in terms of the use of blockchain technology, is going to be shrinking over time relative to the rest of the world that's going to be getting here. So having empathy and be able to put ourselves in the shoes of others. Also, recently I've onboarded, I tried to onboard a friend into crypto, a very smart person, a doctor. And it is the first time I've had such an intimate view into what it's like for someone who's never experienced the space but is interested in it to get in. You're dealing with wallets, Web3 wallets. Why does Rabi support 140 chains, but for Solana I've got to have this other chain, and for this other wallet, et cetera, et cetera. And I just, with that experience, I thought, oh my God, we take for granted so many things that other people would have no idea about. And so that's just been a tremendous focus in the building of near.com, whether it's kind of blank slate screens when you go into an area that's not been used yet, to explain what that is, not using jargon. I mean, we put a huge effort into not having jargon anywhere. What is staking? How do you communicate what staking is to someone who has nothing to do with crypto, or lending, all that kind of stuff? So we put a huge amount of effort into the language around these things, and trying to bridge a new paradigm with the existing context that people have been used to living in for all, their whole life.
Yeah. And, our world, the language that we use, it feels very distant and foreign to a lot of people. And so I think finally people are realizing, like, okay, it's best for us to meet them where they are, rather than expecting some of these newcomers to come in and, educate themselves and kind of overcome that high barrier when it comes to the language and the culture and all this. Let's lower the barrier of entry, and meet them where they are, so that they can also take part in these tools, empower themselves. And I think you're absolutely right to keep that in mind as you're using those principles in everything that you're building there at near.com. So as we look forward, when we think about what's next, we mentioned sort of this next cohort of users. Obviously, there's sort of a closed, there's a group here that have been here for a while, but the idea is that we're going to expand the user base significantly in terms of humans, also in terms of agents that, could be using this technology and these tools. How much are you looking at, building with agents in mind? Do you foresee maybe, one interface just interacting with agents and then giving, the agents the ability to transact and giving them all these tools? As you think about what's next, for near.com, real world assets, fiat connections, everyday financial tools. What are some of these things that you're most focused on keeping in mind when we look at, the next iteration of near.com?
Well, in the long term, as pertains agentic activities, again, I just kind of look at what my own experience has been, and my own experience is integrating more and more agents doing things on my behalf for me, and seeing more and more of the products that I use in the world. I'm getting, they're letting me know, hey, we have an API now, or we have an MCP now that your agent can work with. And I was kind of thinking, what is kind of like a crypto, analogy to this? And we've talked a lot about chain abstraction, and now I'm starting to think about this term product abstraction. I just want to tell my agent what I want to do, what I want to get done, and I don't think much anymore about which of my products the agent is interacting with. So we would definitely want to have a means for agents to be able to interact with your near.com account. And then we would want to make near.com the right place for all the financial things that you would need to live. We would like that to be, no better place than near.com.
Yeah. And I think this is, it's becoming the case. And so as you're developing, we also understand some of these network effects, right? Like liquidity begets liquidity, intelligence begets intelligence. There's data that is going to be involved in both, at the transactional level as well as at the prompting level. All of this can facilitate, a better building experience and feed into one another so that all these products can get better. They can all help them, one product can help another and vice versa. Matt, fantastic. Really appreciate you helping us kick off the show. Just want to kick it over to you. Give us any insight, any advice that you would share with builders as a closing remark, any closing thoughts that you have that we can keep in mind for the rest of the show today.
Advice for builders. I guess the advice would be to try to think in terms of outcome, getting paid, sending, saving, ordering, that kind of thing, and try to, as best you can, decouple yourself from the technology that you've been used to all this time, and really try to have empathy. I think that is the hardest part. It's so easy for us to just say like the word slippage, and that just rolls off our tongue. We all know what that is. But if you talk to someone outside and you show them slippage, you might scare them. They might not finish their their transaction. So just think about those little details.
Yeah, fantastic, Matt. Thank you so much for joining. Rockstar first appearance on the show. Looking forward to having you on again soon and continuing the rest of our virtual Near Day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
See you next time. Thanks, Matt. All right, guys, we're going to keep things moving along. Fantastic first guest. Great way to kick off. You heard a little bit about the app that ate the stack. Near Intense, was such a significant portion, driven so much volume, but this is just one component to the overall stack here, which I think speaks to the volume at which Near is truly doing. Every crypto app promised to simplify on-chain. Near.com is actually doing it. Swaps, perps, payments, every asset, one interface. Do we get into a place where, the interface is just, the interface for the agent? I think it remains to be seen. We could see this chain abstraction, chain aggregation, product abstraction, product aggregation interface in which, the LLM, the agent, is the one that then goes and clicks the buttons, pulls the levers, and executes the transactions. But it was great to discuss with Matt the future of near.com. You guys have also, I'm sure, seen our episodes with Ilya, where he talks about, what it is that they're building for. As you guys know, if you've seen those episodes with Ilya, you know that Near is an AI first company. All of the things that they've done in the blockchain world, the intense cross-chain world, all of that is sort of a side quest. Like, Ilya started, he said he wanted to build, AI, but he quickly realized that AI, has a lot of valuable components, and there needs to be this mechanism of value transfer so that AI agents can interact and transact with one another. And that is what ultimately led to the Near blockchain. There was, quite the quite the technical depth when it comes to sharding, some different blockchain architecture design choices that were made. And so that is what we're seeing live in practice today. And all of these, technological innovations can be applied to all of what we're seeing out there today. Guys, I appreciate you rocking with us in the chat. Virtual Near Day on the Rollup. Circle, Brave, Starknet, and more. Super excited for the insights and the announcements. We appreciate you out there. Hello, Near. Give me some GM Nears in the chat. Stacked lineup, Circle, KyberSwap. Excited for the announcements. Here we go. Hello, hello. Shout out King's Clips. Shout out Rohit. Appreciate you guys rocking with us. Flippa001, Robinhood Near Intent sounds great. Yeah, I really do think, we've got this stock token tokenization on demand sort of mechanism that is just dripping equities into the on-chain ecosystem. You guys have seen, BNB and Solana have a lot of stock tokens just because they've tokenized like this big inventory, but it requires them to just have this bulk of inventory that they tokenize on their own. I think with the tokenization on demand from Robinhood, we're going to see these equities just drip out, and then Near Intents is the mechanism or the vehicle that can then proliferate those tokenized equities across several chains. Let's see, Rag in the chat, appreciate you rocking with us. Near's work on resharding, confidential execution, rising intense volume is actually building real info for private agents. Yeah, it sounds like you've been watching our show. Shout out to King's Clips. Fire142 in the chat. Wow, you guys are rocking with Near in the chat. Hit us up with questions that you want to hear our panelists answer. We're going to bring up our next group in just a moment. Title of this panel is The Chain Shouldn't Matter. Remember, this is Virtual Near Day. This is essentially a virtual conference. I see our next group of panelists in the room. We're going to bring them up in just a moment. What we're going to be talking on this panel, an AI agent doesn't know what chain it's on. It's a pretty heady thing to think about. An AI agent doesn't know what chain it's on, and it shouldn't have to. Probably doesn't care what chain it's on. It cares about outcomes because ultimately that's what the human wants. It cares about outcomes. It wants cheaper, better, faster. It doesn't get involved in the tribalistic nature of a lot of the culture wars that we've seen on these chains. The promise of intent-based execution is that agents express outcomes and the network handles the rest. This panel gets into who's actually building that infrastructure and what it takes to make those promises real. The chain shouldn't matter. We don't have Harshit from Near. We've got our friend Tyler filling in with him. Tyler Bond is going to be replacing Harshit, and we've got Felix from KyberSwap. We've got Hugo from KyberSwap. Let's go ahead, bring them up on the show, and get into our next panel. The chain shouldn't matter. Guys, welcome to the show. Appreciate you guys coming on with us. Welcome. Let's bring the energy. It's a pleasure to have you guys. We're going to get right into it. I know I've been monologuing, but it's a pleasure to have you guys. I think some of you guys, first time on the show. But I'll kick around some questions. Feel free. We're just going to have fun, have a good convo between all of us. So feel free to jump in. Ultimately, we just kind of got a good overview of NEAR.com and how Matt Henderson at NEAR is building, this all-encompassing app. And they've been able to include several different components. Near Intents is a big part of that. $23 billion in volume, but there's AI components, there's wallets, there's perps, there's payments, there's intents, there's all of these things. The chain shouldn't matter, especially when the agents are the ones transacting. I'm curious how you guys are thinking about agents. It kind of feels like we go through these like ebbs and flows, right? Where, oh my goodness, X402 is the greatest thing since sliced bread. We need to get in this thing right now. And then it's like, okay, well, this thing is going to take a little while to come to fruition. And, we get new updates in frontier models, then we're going to sort of see that, continuously see. But still, it's humans that are making the predominant, bulk of transactions on chain. Maybe we'll get into that. Where do you guys stand on this? Do you think we should be building for agents right now? How much time do we have until ultimately this is inevitable? Is it inevitable? Felix, maybe we'll start with you and we'll go down the line, but guys, feel free to just jump in. Felix, I feel like I got a call on someone. I just want to get us all chipping in here. So how you doing, man? And what do you think about agents in this day and age?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I mean, my personal take on agents is, as you said, if you see the usage right now, it's probably still very small in today's kind of importance when we think about what are the things we need to improve in terms of experience this quarter, next quarter. They're the human and possibly like the next wave of people that will come on chain are probably the more dominant target and what we're trying to optimize for. That being said, I think it's very clear that over time, more and more tasks will be outsourced to agents. And while you might do your food delivery or your stock picking or other kind of use cases through an agent, then as that grows, it becomes very clear that the agent will be the one that also decides on which venue they will potentially execute their trade or their swap or whatever they need to do to fulfill your intent. To me, like kind of what the prompt that the user gives to an agent in itself is an intent, and agents could in a way also be seen as competitors to the existing, I guess, DEX aggregators or intent fulfillers, solvers, and so we need to ask ourselves what is our value add in a world where routing, for instance, is completely commoditized and any agent can just find the optimal route by just being smart and doing that. So I think that's where we're thinking in like the next, I'd say 6 to 12 months. I think we still have a bit of time, but I think that definitely questions a bunch of our business models and kind of how we position ourselves.
Yeah, these things are accelerating 6 to 12 months. A lot can happen in that time frame. So honing in a little bit, do you guys think that they're really, do these agents care whatsoever what chain they're on? I don't know why, but the chain, you guys remember Blast, like if there's, for some reason, if there's the best liquidity for some, long tail, third party like swap, if for some reason the best liquidity, the best price execution's on Blast and, my agent can go find that route. You think they're going to do that, or are they like, hey, even having some money on Blast for 5 minutes to do this swap is too big of a risk? Like, do you guys think that there's really any preferences when these agents are making transactions when it comes to chains? What do you guys think? Is it just best price wins?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, there's a couple things that matter when it comes to like what chains agents will want to execute on. And I think even for users, they don't really care so much what chains they're actually on. It's more so like what enables them to do what they actually want to do, whether that's like buying certain assets, maybe they have a preference for native assets rather than wrapped assets, which are, have additional like custody assumptions. I think that once you're just already interacting on chain with these type of assets, it doesn't actually matter that much moving from one chain to a different chain. So I think that they'll probably have like preferred like execution environment where they can just say like, hey, like I prefer to, interact on base chain or Solana or just Hyperliquid or something. But, further than that, it's really about like what they can get and just reaching their goal. Like I think like a lot of the chain abstraction stuff comes down to the chain is just friction to get to the actual product that the user wants to get to. And it's just removing all that friction and making that as easy as possible to actually get to the end goal, which is not like, hey, I want to interact on this chain. It's like, I want to do this thing. Like, I want to, pick this, like, I want to work on this prediction market. I want to make this bet. Like, I want this leverage position. I want this spot position. I want to make this loan. So the actual chain itself, I think, matters less than the actual, like, intent of the user, like what they actually want to accomplish on that chain.
Yeah. So almost entirely outcome driven. And, given that right now, we may have our assets on a particular chain, it presents this ease of use to just execute that transaction on that same chain. But when the use is still just telling our agent, they are able to accomplish this outcome in, something that's easy for us as humans might be different than what's easy for the agent. Could be easier in terms of price or friction for them to go execute on a different chain because it's all just routing through a particular mechanism. Hugo, anything to add here as we think about, what kind of preferences an agent might have when they're making some of these transactions on our behalf?
No, but it's true. Like you sum up quite well, Tyler. But again, like it's still at the end of the day, like we are human and we're programming the agent, right? So we are still telling him like where to go. And I mostly say like most of the time where you want to go where there is liquidity, where there is reliability, and somehow it's like you still have a preference. Like the users still will say, right, you just go on Ethereum because this is where all the liquidity is. So, well, that's.
But this is also the question of who carries the risk, or who guarantees certain things. Like what happens if you actually go on a ghost chain that has a centralized sequencer, and that sequencer goes down while you are trying to execute your trade? Like, you know, if your agent does that, then on your behalf, I think in practice you'll probably still have to, like, you know, tell him that you are fine with taking you know, which chains you are comfortable with. But if you can actually outsource this in an intent-based system to a solver, for instance, and the solver just delivers the outcome on whatever chain you need it, like let's say you want to swap some tokens and liquidity is better on another chain, a solver can possibly take that execution risk, deliver the tokens on the chain that you want them, and then really you can just express things as like, you know, I want to sell this and I want to get as much of the buy token as possible, to not have this, I guess, two-dimensional preference set where it's like price and, I mean, I don't want to lose my money, or I think that when it comes to bridging, another dimension that's very important is time as well. There's certain chains, if you use the native bridge, you have like perfect or like, you know, pretty good security assumptions, and but you might have to wait a couple of days before you get your proceeds. Whereas if you use some other systems, you might have second fast execution, but who can you call in case your bridging transaction gets stuck and you don't get your tokens delivered on the other side? So I think these are like not super trivial trade-offs, and if an agent acts on behalf of a human, it's still the human that somehow needs to tell it what risk it is comfortable with.
Are you guys building with these parameters in mind now? Like, I think it is very intuitive to say, hey, you know, I want my proceeds to get delivered to me on my, say, home chain or chains. Like, say I only want to like keep my balances on, you know, Ethereum mainnet and maybe, you know, one or two other chains. But when it comes to execution, maybe I'll broaden the aperture to maybe 5 to 10 or 15 chains, because my assets are only going to go there for a small amount of time, make the transaction, and then they're going to come back to my home chains, right? And I can set my preference to, hey, I want to maximize speed. I don't really care about liquidity, or, you know, take a little bit longer, but find me the absolute best price execution so that I can get the most amount of coins proceeds for my transaction. Are you guys building with this? You know, we've got KyberSwap, we've got CoW, we've got Near Intense. Like, how much of this is already in practice versus a theoretical design choice that'll get implemented over the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on this when we delivered Swap and Bridge, which we delivered in collaboration also with Near Intense. And there specifically, we, for now, take some decisions on like what is the trade-off between speed and security. Like, I mean, for instance, we trust the Near validator set, and therefore say like that Near is, you know, as secure as potentially a native bridging solution or a CCTP, although they have very different trust assumptions. But I think when we think about like the ideal world, we would love to outsource this risk to solvers, and we would. It's a bit more difficult in the cross-chain sense. I guess it's slightly more difficult than saying I'm on chain A and I want to make a trade and best liquidity lives on chain B. There, really, we would like the solvers to tell the user, hey, it might take a little bit longer. Like, I might not be able to settle you in the next 2 blocks, but I can settle you in maybe 10 blocks or 20 blocks because I need to go on another chain and source liquidity there. And if the user is okay with, you know, things taking a bit longer but getting a better price, then they can sign off on that, and we can deliver the experience. But we learned also from early user feedback, user testing, that the more you try to make a user choose, the more confusing and difficult it becomes. So, you know, just saying I want to sell and give me as much as possible is a very, very easy intent to express. Now, having multiple dimensions to kind of trade off, a lot of users don't even know what is a sensible trade-off and would like to defer that decision to somebody else. But then, you know, whoever does that decision then probably also, you know, carries some risk and responsibility that they might not want to take.
Yeah, I mean, I think just going off of what Felix said, I think it's definitely on the responsibility of the apps, and in that case, like whoever's developing the agent or like the harness around that, to determine like what the best trade-offs are, because it's all trade-offs when you get say like, oh, I want to do everything on one chain, but then I'm whose custody are these assets in, like these wrapped assets, who's the issuer of these assets, what bridges am I using, what kind of execution environment am I on, like what's the trade-off versus going to another chain and doing that. So it's really up to the team that's actually just behind it to do their diligence and say like, okay, well, these are the trade-offs that we make, and this makes sense because it puts the user in the best spot where there's no risk of losing funds or running into poor execution from just no liquidity or like MEV or something like that. So I think it's definitely on the teams that are just putting these products in the hands of users to say like, these are the bridges that are going to have the most reliable execution, and these are the products that there's demand for, and then over time that all aggregates together, and then you have this big suite of products, and that's kind of shaking out right now, I think, with just some of the the biggest crypto apps. Like they're kind of getting integrated everywhere. Like everyone's plugging in like Hyperliquid for perps because there's a lot of liquidity there, and it's fairly easy to access through the bridges that we have. And there's other perps platforms as well, but you have to make a trade-off. Like, do I want to go to this chain? Do I want to go to that chain? Where can I get the best execution? So it's really up to the teams to decide like where they want to put their users, and there's a lot of trust involved there, especially like in this space.
It feels like, I like what you said. I mean, the biggest ones are starting to get integrated everywhere and become ubiquitous. Like you mentioned, Hyperliquid, builder codes. These things are underpinning a lot of the perps trading that's taking place in wallets. I think on near.com as well is another good example. The other one that comes to mind is Morpho. Absolutely crushing it. Morpho's got embedded into Coinbase, and it almost feels like it's you guys remember like the old DeFi mullet, right? Where it was like the modular mullet, where it was like sort of these unified front ends and more modular in the back end. It feels like now we've got this TradFi in the front end, DeFi in the back end, where you can have like PayPal, centralized exchange, these massive brands that have been around for a long time, these financial institutional incumbents that own the relationship with the end customer. Those are the ones that the customers already trust. The consumer behavior is already habitual. They're already going back to these apps time and time again. Those consumers probably won't change their behavior, but it's on the impotence is on the applications to implement, the more efficient, the new features, those things in the back end, and plug into all the things that we've got built now. And it feels like that is sort of the direction that we're headed. I want to kind of get one level deeper in the stack. Felix, you mentioned something about, the solvers. If all of the order flow routing is going through these LLMs, the solvers almost get commoditized. And so given that it feels like cross-chain, we've sort of got to this point where, intense is the right architecture. Maybe there's debate about that. I'm curious what you guys think. If, we've kind of arrived at, what we've found is the most optimal cross-chain architecture. Is it intense? Is it something else? But given that intense relies on solvers and these sorts of things, and that becomes commoditized, like where is the moat? Where is the juice? Is it in the liquidity providers? As people and teams that are building these cross-chain intent platforms, how do you maintain a profitable business if you see parts of your stack start to get commoditized?
Yeah, I mean, for CoW protocol, the answer is pretty clear. It's in the network effects that comes from coincidence of wants. So basically users that are trading at the same time, they get batched together into the same kind of execution problem, and then they act almost as liquidity providers for one another. And so even if the optimal route happens to involve 10 different pools on chain, if there's a user that is either doing a trade directly in the opposite direction of your trade, or even just taking a part of that route and has a resting limit order or is trying to make a trade at the same time, then we can match you guys together as a coincidence of want, and we can do that at the midpoint, so we don't have to pay any spread, any fees. And so I think batched intent system really have these positive networks effect that the more people use them, the higher the efficiency gains are. And we are very bullish on agentized economies to actually significantly up the amount of velocity and number of trades that are going to happen roughly at the same time. Because if you look at just the likelihood of a coincidence of one happen today with the current interest, the current retail usage on Ethereum or other chains, then you see that they happen fairly infrequently. But if you consider that maybe in the future people will have their entire portfolio strategies with complex trading strategies such as buy, low, sell. I mean, implementing a lot of trades per day rather than you literally having to click on every trade, reviewing the transaction, signing on it. If you can actually give your trading strategy to an agent that will trade on your behalf, then we think that that amount of orders will go through the roof. And so any system that can have efficiency gains from batching people together will still retain moat and thus be the natural choice even for an omni-intelligent agent to place their orders through.
Hugo, Tyler, anything to add?
Yeah, sure. So this is true. So actually, I have another take on that, because we speak a lot about NEAR, like a lot of for transaction, for swap, you also need atomic transaction. Like it has to be symbiotic, because most of the time a lot of CoW solvers rely on our infrastructure, Kyber power, maybe hundreds of millions of volume per day, and some of them are solvers that they just don't have the inventory, they just don't have the liquidity or some of the liquidity, and they really need like instant transaction. And so yes, of course they will go where the execution is the best, and this is just like via DEX, via liquidity pools. So no, it's a really symbiosis relationship between both, and you will always need both in the future.
Yeah, and one more take, which might be interesting. You asked about the solvers versus and intense protocols versus like AMMs. Working on AMMs for a while. I worked on Thorchain for 4 years before joining the NEAR Intense team. And just like my take on AMMs versus intense and solvers, like AMMs are really good because they're always on, but they're extremely capital inefficient, where it's the complete opposite for intense and for solvers, where you have this extreme capital efficiency because all you need is a market maker to come on and say, yeah, I'm going to provide liquidity for this one asset, and then they can just be that liquidity provider with a pretty thin book. They can make trades in either direction, which is really nice. But you see like on like 1010 last year where market makers step back, and that becomes a problem when there's no liquidity available, when they decide I don't want to provide liquidity in this moment. So it like on the norm, it provides much greater capital efficiency and just a better experience for users. We can onboard assets much easier. You just like list more assets, have really deep liquidity. But in those edge cases, that's where the AMM really shines. But then you have all this capital that's just sitting there for a long period of time, not really doing much. Impermanent loss. It's very hard to get deep books in an AMM. So there's trade-offs either way. But I think in terms of where this like space is going, I think that Intense is definitely just the more practical way of going about it. And like I think it's also just keep coming up more and more that like TVL is kind of a liability, where that's just like value that's kind of sitting there that is could be exposed to like some kind of exploit or something. So capital efficiency is definitely like a big gain in a couple different ways, especially when you consider that.
Yeah, and so Tyler, maybe you could give us a sense, just starting from the NEAR.com, NEAR Intense, vantage point. We've got KyberSwap, we've got CoW, and then obviously NEAR Intense itself. Could you give us some insight into how you guys all work together? Like, who plugs into who's the front end, who's the back end? Like, could you guys just kind of take us through like what the life cycle is from that vantage point?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of do it all, like where we have like this. So on the back, there's this network, right? There's the NEAR L1, and then on top of that, there's our solver network, which has liquidity on Bitcoin, Zcash, Solana, Hyperliquid, and then that all connects on the NEAR L1. And then we have our one-click API product, which is like it sits on top of the Intents architecture. That's where people come in and say, hey, I want a quote for this, I want to do this trade, I want to do that trade. And then that API product we plug into everywhere. So I think that's what's plugged into CowSwap right now, the integration we did with Swap and Bridge. And that's mostly how we work with a lot of different projects, is we have liquidity on NEAR Intents, and then someone says, hey, we want to, access like your bridging product and being able to swap cross-chain, like, trade assets. And they plug in our API. So they access, they have access to our solver network in that sense. And then, people say like, oh, I want to provide liquidity. They come in as solvers. And then near.com is another implementation of our one-click API, where that's something that is like internal to like our team. And that's just like our implementation of it, like what we think is just a good user experience and something that we want to, just grow internally. But mostly we work with, external teams just shipping out like our API product, but it's all built on the same liquidity base. So that's, liquidity begets liquidity. So the more people get plugged into that, like the stronger the book gets and the better execution gets, and just good for everyone all around.
And then, as Hugo said, I guess on the CowSwap side, when you're trading, then your order gets auctioned off also with a network of solvers, and they're I think they're not called KyberSwap, but like a KyberSwap affiliated team runs their own solver, and then some other solvers might tap into any API, including KyberSwap's one, to find the best route.
Got it. Yeah, and so you guys all sort of have liquidity and inventory on your own, right? Because you've got solvers that plug in, but then you also provide APIs out. So, a solver is sort of an independent, but they can be solving for both NEAR Intents and CowSwap at the same time. If they're, solving over on NEAR Intents, but the order comes in on CowSwap, maybe you guys route that over to NEAR Intents, and vice versa. Like, order might come in at CowSwap, and, you guys might, plug into the solver from the NEAR Intent side. KyberSwap, same thing. Orders can come in, but you guys can also execute orders. You guys all sort of do, this consumer-facing order flow routing, but also have a network of solvers underneath the hood, and also run your own solvers. Is that the case?
At least I would say Cow Protocol doesn't run its own solvers. We've been for a while like contemplating if we should, but we think that like in order to make a neutral and to basically be a good arbitrator of the competition, we don't want to participate in it. It might change at some point, but at least right now we're not running solver ourselves.
And so. Yeah, Hugo, if you had anything to add.
No. I also wanted to mention that is also not our case. We're not running our own solvers because we want to be independent, and so we let the third party do that for us.
Yeah, and so given order flow, routers, all these things, especially as more orders tick up, Felix, you mentioned coincidence of wants is sort of where you guys see a lot of opportunity, given with the potential rise in orders as a result of agentic transactions. Hugo and Tyler, where do you guys see the moat? Like, where do you see the most opportunity in the intent, solver stack? Do you think it's at the routing point of view? Do you think it's at the solver perspective? Where do you think that there's still a lot of opportunity here?
Yeah, I think that the opportunity is just getting more. It's liquidity, right? Like, it's how good can you what assets do you have, and then how good liquidity is there for that. But I think the real moat is just distribution. So I think that's been discussed on on tech Twitter for forever now. But the real moat is how many users can you get it into the hands of, and does that provide some kind of value to them? Does it help them make the trades that they want? Does it help them reach the goal that they want to? So I think that the moat is just figuring out what products that people want, whether that's equities outside the US through RWAs, whether that's exposure to things like gold, XAUT, from Tether Gold, or another, what exactly does that user want? And then just providing, a good user experience and good liquidity for that. I think, whoever solves the whoever gets distribution, wins the game. Not that, there's an end to this, but, whoever actually gets that in the hands of users and like at a mass scale is whoever benefits the most and just makes the most difference to people. It's providing a good service that users want. So I think that's the name of the game, is just figuring out like what do people actually want to do on chain, what makes people's lives better, and then how do we accomplish that.
And it's a similar question, but I guess a little bit more quantifiable, and the near intense, places where I have the most insight into the numbers, at least at this point, $23 billion and $40 million of fees. Does that seem like, is that pretty much on par with what the ecosystem is pricing this at? Just generally, like, I know these are near intense numbers, but do you guys as a group think that this is like, are we charging too much? Are we charging too little? Because it seems like, if we're on the scale of billions of dollars, it almost seems like, that you could be charging more and there could be more fees at play here, but you guys are the experts when it comes to, maybe pricing models and the right monetization strategy here. What is sort of the baseline for, how much it costs to conduct one of these transactions? I'm not sure exactly how much that is in terms of basis points, but $40 million on $23 billion of volume, does that feel like it's on par with the rest of the ecosystem? And generally as a group, do you guys think we're moving in the direction of like more monetization because we're providing valuable service, or, we're going to bring this down as, more of this technology becomes better and more efficient?
So I think monetization in the space is an extremely interesting question and problem, and we had our fair share of it at CoW Protocol last year when we started charging volume fees. So if I get the numbers correctly, it seems about 20 basis points on near intense, which is, I guess, less than other apps that control a lot of price-insensitive users like MetaMask and Phantom or some other big retail-focused apps. I think when it comes to specifically Ethereum whales and hardcore users, that is a ton. Like I think KyberSwap, we tried to, we started charging a 2 basis point volume fee last year, and we saw a big change in user behavior. Basically, people stopping to use KyberSwap for this 2 basis point fee, even though we think that our execution on average is at least 2 basis points better than what they would get elsewhere. So then in the sense that we would still be best off to go to KyberSwap, but okay, I mean, I have to say that, of course. But I think there's other ways that we see competitors, for instance, taking fees that are less clear to the user. So 20 basis points is somewhere in the middle, I would say. There's different ways of how you can take fees. One way is to just basically extract positive slippage, right? Like if you get a better outcome than what the user expected, you're not forced. I mean, there's no law that tells you have to give the user like what is currently available on chain. So I think a lot of competitors just capture that positive slippage entirely and say like as long as the user gets, the user cannot get more than what they basically signed off at. And the other thing we see is sometimes just on the quoting side, so you don't actually call it a volume-based fee, you just quote the user slightly worse. So I think this has also been done on Revolut, for instance, when they say like your forex trading doesn't have any fees, but then the rate that you get is actually not that good. So in a sense, that's also a fee. And I would say like as the industry matures and especially like on the DEX layer and like the close to the actual chain layer, fees are being competed away, and it's very hard to take good fees. Where you're still able to take very nice fees is if you own the distribution and you have retail users that are maybe less price sensitive. So again, that probably is one of the things that you should look out for when you're trying to acquire users.
Yeah, Hugo, Tyler, yeah, please.
Yeah, I think that it depends on what product that like someone's using. So I think like for example, if you're doing a stablecoin to stablecoin swap, you're probably pretty price sensitive to that. Like if you put in 1,000 USDC, you probably want pretty close to 1,000 USDT out on the other end. Well, I think like where most of the monetization comes in is from unstable assets, the Bitcoin to Ethereum or Zcash to Solana or something. I think that there's much more margin in there, and there's just there's much more of a market like to go back and forth. And there's not like a book that's like a Zcash to Solana book that is going to have like super deep liquidity. So I think that there's just like a lot more space in there to actually like monetize swaps. But you look at like the hyperliquid, when people are trying to get like high gains by playing with leverage and perps, they don't care so much about like you could charge them however much fees, and it really doesn't matter because that's just like that's pretty small compared to like what the risk reward is on what they're trying to do. So it really depends on like what the action is. So if you're going stable to stable, there's basically no margin, maybe 1 basis point, 2 basis points, if that. If it's like some kind of like high risk high reward thing, then there's probably higher fees involved in that, just because that's just part of that user's risk tolerance for doing that. So it totally depends on like what the product is. I think for yield in this space, it looks different as well. So I think every single like use case and way to use swaps has like some kind of different pricing model with it. I think that I would like to see cross-chain swaps as cheap as possible, because I think that's really how you get people to and especially institutions and businesses to come on chain and adopt it. Like they're not going to come and use on chain products if they're more expensive than a traditional product, and they offer less guarantees and safety and other headaches that might come with moving on chain. So I think it totally just depends on what the user is trying to do.
Tyler, intuitively, I also want to see cross-chain swaps and transactions be as cheap as possible. But then I'm like, wait, we're in this like very revenue-oriented market, and all of the fees that are generated via cross-chain swaps get get used to buy back the tokens that we're holding. So it's like, yeah, I want my fees to be less, but I also want the chains, or I want the companies to have revenue so that these tokens go up and these things do well. So I think that you're right. The long term view is, let's bring these things down. The pie gets bigger, lower transaction fees means more users. Companies still, do quite well when we have a large swath of user activity, all paying a little bit of fees, still generates a lot of revenue. Companies, tokens still do quite well. Guys, I think that's it. Appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. It was a pleasure to go deep into the intent-based cross-chain swap business industry here. And appreciate you guys joining us on Virtual NEAR Day. We will keep up with everything happening in the intent market. So hope to have you guys back again soon.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Thank
Awesome.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen. We'll see you again soon. Cheers. All right. Yeah, it's a funky mindset to think here. We want to bring fees down, and the best example of this right now is Ethereum. It's like Ethereum's doing everything in its power to bring transaction costs down, right? Really trying to commoditize block space, saying like it is so cheap to make transactions here. All of those fees come down. It becomes extremely easy to conduct transactions, extremely affordable to conduct transactions. But then you get into this revenue crisis. You get into this place where, yeah, fees are extremely affordable, yet the company that you want the token or the equity of the company to go up, that thing isn't generating a lot of fees because they worked so hard on making these technological improvements to bring the fees down. So the solution to all of this is expand the pie, user adoption. We need a large swath of users in order to overcome and make up these much lower fees, right? Because ultimately the cumulative volume and activity here is what ends up increasing the pie for everyone. And you can get low fees and revenue that helps these tokens go up. I can see our next group of panelists in the back, so we're going to bring them up on the stage now. And the next panel is all about confidentiality. We've got Dillon from NEAR, we've got Daniel from ZODL, we've got Joel from Dash, and we've got Maya from Starknet. Everyone here is doing everything in their power to make sure that we maintain the cypherpunk privacy ethos that this space was built on. We've got big panel here, so we're gonna have some fun, guys. I might just ask some general questions, and then feel free to just jump in. But first, it's a pleasure to have you all here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's great.
Good to be here.
Awesome. Great to be here, guys.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining. Privacy in crypto has evolved through multiple layers. Started off with Bitcoin, realized, and chain analysis helped us realize Bitcoin wasn't so private. And then, we ended up in a world where a lot of teams now are making this a forefront and a priority. We're implementing it at different levels of the stack, the asset layer, the contract layer, the smart contract layer. A mix of ZK proofs are in there as well. TEEs are in there as well. Guys, what I really want to talk about is how, we're thinking about privacy in an agentic world. It feels like the inevitable trajectory of this space is more agents transacting. The market share of agents is going to increase relative to humans on chain. How should we think about privacy in an agentic first on-chain economy? Open question. Feel free to jump in.
Yeah, so I don't have a lot to say on this, but one thing I will say is in this increasingly agentic world, what we have to understand is agentic analysis is what's going to be also on the rise. And so with, for example, just countless on-chain transactions for everyone to watch, pattern recognition, where flows are coming in and out of where, especially in the age of exploits, etc., there's going to be a microscope on this right now. And so I think that before, like for example, my first Bitcoin wallet ever, I just had one address, and when they upgraded to HD and I got a new address every time, that's showing how old I am. It's kind of annoyed me. I'm like, why? I wanted my favorite one. I didn't understand why privacy was that important. And I think a lot of people hid because no one was looking. But now everyone is looking, so you need to protect yourself.
Yeah, one thing I'll add is agents don't care, guys. They're not like humans. They have no allegiances. They want to use the best tech. And so when you look at agentic commerce, especially on chain, our general take is, they're going to be using tools, products that allow them to get where they need to be, allow them the most anonymity. And so one thing that we're prioritizing in Zcash is the Orchard pool, soon to be Ironwood, soon to be Tachyon. The higher we get that TVL and encrypted money, more money is going to flow in, right? Liquidity begets liquidity. So my general take around the agentic economy when it comes to privacy is agents don't care. They want to use the tools that allow them to be the best versions of themselves. They've got no allegiances to Bitcoin, to Zcash, to NEAR, to Starknet. I think if we can prioritize, the shielded pool, that's going to be one thing that draws them in.
Yeah, one thing that I'll just piggyback off of what Dan said. I think is that agents don't care about which assets they're using, right?
Right.
So with Near Intense, we're able to bring this privacy set that a lot of people are focused on. We're able to bring this to our 140 plus assets across 35 different chains. And so we enable the most flexibility for these agents to be able to transact and do these e-commerce. And this is one of the ways that we feel from the Near side, we're well set up for an agentic future.
So I would say that one of the most important things for agentic payments is scale. So you need both privacy and scale. And you also need to set up a protocol that enables privacy and scale even if the agent is not even malicious but manipulated. So you need a protocol that supports real privacy, enables real privacy, users that are responsible with agents, and also you need scale.
Yeah, I think and I want to get into how some of these privacy enabled features can be combined at different levels of the stack. Because I can even imagine let's say we have privacy at the asset layer, right? So that just transfers are encrypted and balances are encrypted. Obviously, we want to do more with our assets, and so getting this at the smart contract layer, at the application layer, all of this is going to be important. So that because even if you let the cat out of the bag just one time, all of a sudden all of your data is exposed. You need end-to-end privacy for this thing to really work. I want to start just with the Near Zcash, dynamic because, it is virtual Near Day. I want to talk about this one use case because I think this is the case. But if it's the case, it feels really powerful, and I haven't seen enough people talking about it. We know about this encrypted pool on Zcash. You can shield your assets. obviously the idea here is that you want to do, more with your assets, right, Daniel? So like, it's not just enough that we want to have this shielded. We want to be able to stake it, trade it, swap it, move it across all these different applications, and for it to remain confidential. Maybe that's where near intents comes in, or maybe there's different smart contract privacy features that can come in. Can you guys just talk about, let's say I have Zcash that I've chosen to shield. Is it possible to then leverage something like a near intents to, swap it or earn some yield on it somewhere and keep that data confidential and shielded?
Yeah, Dillon, I'll start, and then I would love to toss it over to you. Look, within Zodi, you can ask, there are many different folks working on Zcash. Everyone has differing opinions. Within ZODL, our priority is to make Zcash usable. And we're kind of dead set around this idea of encrypted money at scale. So our focus is making Zcash within the Orchard pool usable and allowing people to get in there, get out there, and actually spend it. So NEAR has been an invaluable partner, as has Solana, with them listing OmniZec, which NEAR was heavily involved in. You can now buy Zcash, on Hyperliquid Spot as well. So what we're seeing is people are willing to buy Zcash outside the ecosystem, but we want to bring them back into the Orchard pool. So my focus and my goal is to make Zcash as an asset usable. So what does that mean? Spending it in the real world, paying with friends, everything that you would think of from like a Venmo or a Cash App, we want to enable with Zcash. So even if you're profit taking Zcash into USDC, we want to keep you within the ZODL app and within the ecosystem to some extent. So to that lens, we will be leveraging NEAR quite extensively for swapping, as we already have. There are many other venues now looking to integrate Zcash. And we are extremely grateful for the NEAR team to take a bet on Zcash as an asset and bet on this team, because they were one of the first to allow for us to make it ubiquitous. But now it's mostly getting it in the hands of users and allowing people to actually pay for it using encrypted cash.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say from the NEAR side, we've definitely enjoyed the partnership with Zcash. It's been one of our more successful integrations and ecosystem partnerships. The way that we look at it is we have two different kind of methods of our go-to-market strategy, right? One of those is on the B2B side. So on the B2B side, we enable swapping in and out of Zcash into any other asset, as Dan mentioned, making it more usable. And whether you're taking profits or whether you're entering into the Zcash ecosystem, making it easier for people and users to do that. The other way, and I think you might have heard earlier from Matt from the NEAR.com team, is we have the B2C kind of app with NEAR.com. And with NEAR.com, what you can do is you can hold all of your assets in the confidential balance, and other things that we're enabling soon. You'll be able to enter your perps positions confidentially through Hyperliquid builder codes. You'll be able to stake and earn confidentially. We've got earn vaults that are just on the horizon that are coming out, and working on things like private send and these types of things where you're allowed to take all of your assets, especially Zcash or Dash or USDC or what have you, and you're able to do anything within the realm of crypto and Web3 in a confidential and private way.
Yep. We have someone in the chat here that says, personally, I will love a way in which AI agent can start accepting NEAR as payment for subscription so it can drive NEAR token utility. I can imagine, we're going to see agents start to do all kinds of crazy things and accept all kinds of crazy payments, NEAR, Zcash, Dash, Stark, all of these things, these are AI agent money. Maya and Joel, I also, I'm curious how you guys think about privacy at Starknet and Dash. Where do you see yourselves implementing the privacy elements? Is it at the asset level? Is it at the smart contract level or the chain level? And how do you think through some of these different mechanisms?
Yeah, so at Starknet, we implemented what we're calling a protocol level privacy pool. It's a canonical privacy pool. And the way it works is anyone can shield any asset in the same pool. So it's the same anonymity set for all token types. We have client-side proving. Since Starknet is a ZK rollup, we have the same infra and language and prover on client side and on the server blockchain side. So everything is compatible, which enables us to have a very rich privacy ecosystem. So we can have basically any multi-call operation happen privately, or if it goes outside the pool, anonymously. So you can today use any app on Starknet anonymously via this pool. All you need is to write a helper or an anonymizer contract for the app. And additionally, we're now having integrations with other blockchains. So we're building a product called Off Market, which is basically a anonymizer for Polymarket, which means you can trade on Polymarket, but it makes your trades unlinkable. So we just announced this. So it works pretty fast, compatible with Starknet Infra and with EVM wallets. So it's seamless. Yeah.
Maya, did you see there was just today there was someone that they do the teleprompter, you know, like when the president reads off the screen, they have the teleprompter. The person who was in charge of the teleprompter was betting, I think on Kalshi, maybe Polymarket, you know, what the person would say.
Oh yeah. That happens a lot. And we actually, because we worked on privatizing stuff on Polymarket, we actually have a very good tracking of what happens on Polymarket. And I have a detector for insider trading on Polymarket, which works pretty well. So I find a lot of positives that disappear the next day from the website. So it's kind
nuts.
Of,
yeah. And Joel, on the Dash side, where are you guys thinking about privacy? You know, protocol level, asset level. How do you think about this?
Yeah, definitely protocol level. And after all, we are the oldest, I would say, surviving cryptocurrency that had any explicit privacy function built in. So this might be a little bit of an alpha because we haven't put out the announcement yet for another couple days, but Dash has integrated a shielded pool based on Zcash's Orchard technology, and it is live on mainnet currently right now. And we just have to launch the public beta of the wallets that actually support it, but it's live on the network. So we're adopting the same shielded technology as Zcash. We have a few different, hopefully, optimizations that make things work very fast, like 1-second confirmations, as well as I think we can sync an entire wallet from zero in about 20 or so seconds. And syncing wallets has been the bane of any privacy coin sort of existence. And we're also adding a shielded asset pool for our rich token functionality. So you could, for example, once it's launched, do shielded stablecoin transfers with 1-second finality, which sound, you know, in my opinion, pretty cool. And we're very, very happy that Zcash has paved the way with so much of this. And there's I like that there's so many approaches to solving the fundamental privacy issues in the space. And I like that we have different but similar sorts of paths that we can kind of A/B test things. So I know that, for example, shielded assets is something that Zcash basically came up with, and it's not 100% clear from my understanding if that's going to be implemented, but we're more than happy to test it out and make the mistakes and show if it works or not and see if there's a product market fit and then grow the whole space together there.
Anything to add from the Zcash side?
He's shielded.
He's shielded.
My mic is shielded. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I guess our take internally at ZODL is, as I mentioned previously, there are many different folks working on Zcash, many different organizations. Our take is to focus on making Zcash a top 3, top 5, hopefully top 3 asset at like a shielded level, and bring the usability around that to make it, enable like the promise of encrypted cash. And once we get to that stage, we can maybe start exploring, ZSAs or Zcash shielded assets. But until then, as I mentioned previously, we're going to be relying on teams like NEAR, on teams like Hyperliquid, on teams like Solana for that kind of network effect of usability outside of the shielded pool, whether that's loans, whether that's AMM yield, whether that's delta neutral strategies. There's a lot of design space we can now do on chain because of ecosystems like NEAR, Solana, and Hyperliquid. So that's what we're going to tap into. But for ZODL, we're going to be focused on user experiences. We're going to make Zcash usable, and we're going to get it to a top 3 asset.
There we go. We're gonna be right there with you.
That's right.
Yeah, it's huge too. And now that you have the initial foundation and the basis, all of these use cases open up. We've got the opportunity to you can do stable coins backed by these private assets. We can do all kinds of fun DeFi things as a result with these mechanisms. given that these things are starting to become ubiquitous, we're starting to implement privacy at different levels of the stack. All of this is starting to create this end-to-end encrypted, confidential, shielded ecosystem. I'd imagine, you guys probably would know better than I would, but regulators are starting to pay a little bit closer attention. How do we work with regulators without letting the cat out of the bag? Like there's a, and we had Alex Shevchenko, the NEAR Intense co-founder, on the show yesterday talking about his idea of practical privacy. He was just talking about how they're in NEAR Intense. I think this is soon to be integrated. There will be this compliance council, if you will, which will have this opportunity to create this this key, which will give if there's a warrant or something that's justified, this council will have to approve it. He gave the example of it's North Korea that's saying, hey, we want access to your entire system. No, the council's not going to approve that. But if it's the FBI, they come in, they say, hey, we have reason to suspect, to reasonable suspicion that, there's some fraudulent activity or illicit activity happening here. We need, access or visibility into this particular account. There is a mechanism to say, hey, for only this account and this account only, and for this time frame only, and there's different levels of granularity. There are mechanisms in order to ensure compliance. How do you guys think about this? We've also heard from, guys like Vitalik who take privacy very seriously, like the walk away test, right? Like, even if I wanted to hack or give some sort of, visibility underneath the hood of the private elements, I couldn't, right? It's that technically sound. Open question. How should we think about this? We want to make sure that we're remaining confidential and shielded, but we also don't want to get taken down by, the state actors at large. What is the right balance here?
Yeah, I can go ahead and start on that, Robbie, since you kind of gave the layup and already did a little bit on the selective disclosures that we have with confidential intents. But yeah, we're happy to work with law enforcement agencies and partners when needed. We look at it as practical privacy, where a user doesn't want their activity tracked or linked, right? Like if I'm thinking about something like payments and I go to the bodega down the street and I pay $6 for something, do I want that person to then be able to use some kind of AI tool to figure out my entire balance and all of my history and transactions and what I was doing on pump.fun and this and that? No, we do not. At the same time, we don't want to be a Tornado Cash or, a Mixer or anything like that. So we have partners in the space. We have a full compliance team that we've hired up in the recent months that has been taking very serious look at this and being proactive with law enforcement agencies. And it's something that we definitely are taking seriously. On the flip side, we think that most users, as long as they have a decent level of privacy, then that's okay with them. So on the B2C side, that is the most secure and most private setup that we have with NEAR, with NEAR.com. There's no RPCs for users to query. You can't figure out user balances. You don't know if during Joel's alpha spill, if I just bought some Dash on NEAR.com. And then on the B2B side, we have different levels of confidentiality that are more practical. And on foreign to foreign chain transactions, it's a little bit difficult, but we're figuring out ways to implement harder and harder security measures to make it harder for users to figure out, or security researchers and hobbyists to figure out what's going on. So yeah, we're taking a very much practical approach to this and working with law enforcement agencies when needed, while keeping users safe and confidential.
Yeah, one thing I'd add to that, we are powered by NEAR Intense. We've been powered by NEAR Intense for a while. So we they have their own compliance when it comes to screening wallets into and out of, or specifically into and out of the shielded pool, using NEAR Intense. But one of the things that, I was shocked when I joined ZODL and Zcash was the lobbying efforts that have gone in from our ecosystem into communicating to DC about what we're doing and what we're building. So Paul Brigner on our team, he's our head of policy, is in DC petitioning for Zcash, petitioning for encrypted money. And there's this saying within Zcash, within ZODL, and within our community that the TAM for freedom is larger than the TAM for criminal activity. And we stand by that, and we believe that. And Paul is doing amazing work in DC, lobbying for, this little niche called privacy within crypto.
Very cool. Yeah.
I want to add that we have a lot of compliance built in, very similar to what NEAR are doing. I do think that it can't be the case that users on chain have less privacy than users off chain, right? So if you have some privacy while paying with your credit card, you have some privacy with your bank account. It can't be that everything has to be out there on the blockchain. It has to be legally reasonable to have some level of privacy, as long as it is monitored to a reasonable extent, and there is some entity that can answer regulatory inquiries, law enforcement inquiries. I think that anyone that's not actually trying to use these services for criminal intents then shouldn't have a problem with that.
Yeah. Joel, anything to add on the regulatory front?
Yes, and this is one of those things where we kind of have this struggle between when this technology was created. Let's just start with Bitcoin, right? Decentralized financial systems and now data systems. When this was created, it was openly created with the possibility of being an adversarial technology. Satoshi was notably very anonymous, had no VCs behind him that we know of, no traces at all, basically operated under the assumption that if discovered, he would be arrested and thrown in prison, like many of his predecessors were with other forms of e-cash out there, digital gold, etc. And so that's kind of the roots of this technology. That's the roots of the value proposition of this technology, is it works for no matter who uses it, no matter where in the world, for whatever. And then, of course, we have the other side of things, which is in the real world, people live under jurisdictions and under laws. And if they can't use something in a legal way, some people, criminals will use it, protesters will use it, desperate people will use it, but the bulk of humanity might not. And I believe this technology is for the human race. This will make us all better off. And so the struggle also, laws, regulations, social norms, etc., changed wildly over the years. I guess our approach, again, Dash is a very decentralized project, so this you could have slightly different takes around, but for the most part, the understanding is that we're building something that enables the most use cases for the most people in most of the world, and we're trying to make it useful to everyone. So if someone needs to use it for something, for some kind of human rights activism where they're terrified of their payments being discovered by whatever the local warlord might be, it works for that. If they need to do it in a fully compliant, kind of MiCA compliant AMLR, all that EU stuff that we're currently dealing with, kind of navigating that situation, they can also do it through that, through that thing. So that's one reason why I think that, for example, privacy is absolutely essential, and it's also essential that it's not necessarily mandated, because people do have either legal reasons or other use case reasons why they might not want privacy in some cases. I have operated some public funds before where I intentionally concentrate all funds into a single published address, so the whole world can see this is how much I have, this is how much I'm working with, I'm not scamming anyone. And there's a use case for that. But my private funds, nobody's business.
Have freedom to choose their own freedom tech. So that's why we're all building different things, right?
Yeah, and I think it was Alex yesterday that talked about how, effectively, if we think about cash today, right? We've got, cash in a bank, in a checking account, and then we've got cash on our counter, and then we've got cash in a bank vault. There's different varying levels of convenience and security/privacy that we can use, and ultimately money is a technology, and so it makes sense. And I gave the analogy that you don't want to, if you're trying to dig a hole, you don't want a hammer, you want a shovel. There's different tools for different purposes, and therefore we should have different flavors of private money in order for to utilize for different purposes. Guys, thank you so much for joining. It's all the time that we got today, but the TAM of privacy and freedom is absolutely enormous, and I really appreciate you guys all coming here today and building freedom tech. It is very, very important. Really appreciate you guys coming on. Stay confidential, stay shielded. We'll see you again soon.
Cheers, guys.
And thanks again.
Thanks for having us.
See you next time. Thanks, everyone. Guys, we are staying private. We're staying confidential, and we're staying nice and liquid, unlevered. Markets are looking pretty good, pretty chill today. Let's see how the chat's doing. Privacy-based, stable, flat coin. I like it. I do think as we get more Zcash, NEAR, all these things are going to open up in terms of their DeFi ecosystems. But it's important that we maintain privacy and confidentiality at the base level. And that could mean, when it comes to a smart contract, it's at the contract level, could be at the chain level, could be at the asset level. If we get it at the asset level and then we can port that private asset all across the ecosystem and use it in DeFi, I think we're going to get some very, very interesting use cases. I do think a private collateral-based stablecoin is going to be extremely valuable. Could see a Zcash backed stablecoin looking pretty good. Shadow Hell says this is a good project. See Money Music, so the FBI can't be corrupt. Oh boy, that is a whole nother conversation. I think there's some streams and podcasts that do quite well in that regard. So NEAR will be happy to give our data or crypto to the FBI if they simply ask. I don't think it's that simple. Remember, there is this compliance council, right? They're trying to take this approach of practical privacy. See Money Music, I understand the very, the libertarian viewpoint on this, but I do think that there's, varied ways of approaching this question. You don't want the law enforcement to shut down the protocol, right? Then there's no protocol to use for privacy, right? And the important thing is, just don't do anything illegal and you'll be fine. We don't want to enable illegal activity on the protocol. Flippa, thank you for the Zcash Alpha. Now time for the NEAR Alpha. I know you guys want to understand the supply constraints on the NEAR token. Let's see, do we have someone that can speak on this? I think maybe towards the end, we're gonna get maybe George or someone that can speak on the NEAR token. I know that's what you guys want to hear about. But again, more activity, more use cases, more volume, more revenue for NEAR means more revenue and value accrual to the token. If we can do that and it can overcome any sort of inflation, we're in a position for some explosive movements. Oskoi, personally, I will love a way in which AI agent can start accepting NEAR as payment for subscriptions so it can drive NEAR token utility. Man, I think you're going to be pleased about what is coming down the pipeline. GM, See Money Music, I got some NEAR. Appreciate you guys rocking with us. Stay tuned. More alpha, Zcash, NEAR, all of the above. We're going to bring up our next panel in just a moment. This next panel is called Cheaper, Smarter, Private by Default. I think this is going to be a really fun one. Cheaper, smarter, private by default. Private model routing isn't a trade-off anymore. It's how you get the right model for the task at the right cost with the right hardware guarantees underneath. The infrastructure making privacy the default instead of the premium. That is what our next panel is going to be all about. And so we're going to bring up our panelists in just a moment. This one's going to be fun. We've got guys from sort of outside of the crypto world, but coming in on the AI front, talking about the privacy element as well, from Intel, from Brave, and as well from NEAR AI. I'm excited. We've already talked a lot about NEAR Intense. Now we're going to get a little bit deeper into the AI conversation. I see our panelists are already in the back, so why don't we bring them up on the stage and we get this panel started. There they are. Guys, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you guys.
Hey, Ruby.
Hey, Robbie.
Absolutely. Welcome. Thank you guys for joining. We are about halfway through virtual NEAR Day. It's a fun online conference we're having today. So appreciate you guys rocking with us. As I said, we talked a lot about some of this, on-chain financial elements that underpin a lot of these transactions. We've talked about private transactions on chain. But I'm excited to get into the AI conversation because I think a large portion of our industry feels as if AI agents are going to be driving a lot of the volume of transactions that we're going to see going forward, maybe, you know, in a matter of months and especially for years. So again, name of this panel, cheaper, smarter, private by default. There's really no more trade-off, right? When it comes to privacy, we can effectively get just as good intelligence, and it can be confidential by default and private, so that, you know, we're not sharing our data, you know, all across the internet. How close are we? And by the way, guys, I'm just going to ask kind of open questions. Feel free to jump in, and, you know, we don't need to go one by one. You know, guys, we can just, you know, we'll have a fun chat here. So, question is, how close are we to a world where users, developers can just automatically get the right model for the task? Like, you know, maybe we can start with these general models, but then there's like, you know, these sub models underneath at the best cost, you know, strong hardware backed, privacy guarantees built in from the start. These things are getting incredibly sophisticated right off the jump. How close are we to just, you know, getting like these big general sophisticated models and actually getting some, you know, sophisticated, you know, agent orchestration underneath to fulfilling these tasks? And I just saw news from Jensen today that said, you know, we're still at the beginning of the AI cycle. You know, I think he's incentivized to say such things. But where do you guys stand on this? How far along are we to really getting a flourishing, you know, agentic world out there?
I think we are like really close, to be honest. Like, we've seen, like, especially with these very recent models coming out, like JN 5.2, Kimi K3, just coming out today. Like, so all these models can be run inside our like private enclaves, we call them, and this basically enables everybody to use like amazing intelligence, but coming out of like this like privacy preserving cloud that we built with different partners. And yeah, I think it's coming along. I think now there's like no, like the distance between like open source models and closed source models is like shrinking down like so fast, and we can expect like super soon that this like privacy preserving infrastructure to like enable the best like AI agents in the world, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with Pierre. Actually, I think we are much closer than people think, probably. But the key shift is that I think privacy has to become part of the routing decision itself, right? Not an, you know, afterthought. The next step is adding, you know, trust as a first-class routing decision dimension alongside the existing dimensions like model cost, latency, model capability, and so on. So I think this is where confidential computing and attestation become important. Hardware-backed, you know, trusted execution environment can protect the workload and data in use, and independent attestation makes that protection, you know, verifiable and automatable. I think that's the next step, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree with what the other panelists are saying too, but also I think that a big part of this is going to come down to what are the use cases too, that are finding the market fit, and because I think that the tech is closer than people suspect to actually being able to do these things. And I mean, like with what we're doing at Brave, everything is basically handled with privacy first and user first kind of as our principles. And so we're able to go out there and stay competitive with incumbents and new people coming into the market. So I think that a lot of this too is around finding the fit, but I think that, you know, that's the harder nut to crack right now compared to like technical challenges. I mean, and we're also learning a lot too. I mean, we've given the ability for people to bring their own models and to do auto selection, and the amount of people that are choosing auto it's higher than what I think a lot of people would expect to.
Yeah, I think, you know, people and I find myself, some of this is personal anecdote, you know, like I find myself choosing auto more often on some of these models because, well, sometimes I just want a quick answer, and you know, sometimes I want it to really think through, and then also like I am starting to get a little bit more token conscious. Whereas, previously it was like, let's just token max, foot on the gas here. Let's burn all the tokens. There's different considerations. And so I think, who's going to be more intelligent about its own token consumption for the model itself, and letting the model sort of choose, okay, what is the best model for this, is probably the best way to go about it. And so, when we're thinking through this, Jerry, you mentioned private model routing. Maybe you could just unpack a little bit more like what this means, because at this point, is it as simple as like, I'm going to hit this general model, it's going to, route my query to, whether it's the most advanced or the most thoughtful or the instant, version of the model? Is it that simple? And where does the privacy get baked in? Maybe you could just expand upon what this private model routing means in context.
Yeah, sure. From our perspective, from Intel's perspective, I think private model routing means the routing layer does more than just pick a model, right? It also evaluates the trust posture of the environment where that model will run. So the router, I think, should consider questions like, hey, is this model running inside a confidential computing environment? And is the workload or the model the known good workload? Yeah, right. We have measurement of the workload itself. We should ask, hey, is the model the known good workload? Has the runtime environment been tested and match the trust policy? So I think the important point here is that routing should not require build trust, blind trust in an infrastructure layer, right? Or blind trust in infrastructure provider. It should be based on evidence which can be independently verified. So this is our understanding. Yeah.
Got it.
Something, sorry, Robbie. Something I just want to say, like on the other routing capabilities, like this is still like an ongoing research discussion, because it's not easy to say like for a given query, do you need like a small model? Do you need a big model? Like it's very like arbitrary, right? It's like who decides that a question is like easy or not. So I think there are like different personas, right? Like usually like software engineers, most of my friends, they would always use, the best model, like Fable, I wouldn't say names, the best models in the market right now is like the highest efforts you can do. And some would just they just want the work to get done. Like if it's just like web search and stuff like this, then yes, it's fine to use these light models and just pick auto because you don't really care if this request is not routed to the most, competent model. I think it's very different personas based on your different needs. But and I just want to say like auto classifiers, like auto routing is still like TBD. Like you can see like the biggest providers in the market, not all of them offer like auto because it's not super reliable at the moment. Yeah.
Right. Very subjective. Yeah. And I think it was Luke who mentioned, there are it's very case by case. It's very case dependent upon, what the user is trying to accomplish. And so, Luke, given that, Brave is, in production and you guys have, tons of browser activity, you have a vantage point. I'd imagine, actually, I'll frame this as a question. Do you have a vantage point into what people are using this for? Can you see, and do some data sort of indexing on, okay, most of this is, enterprise flow, or most of this is user flow, and, they're interested in, these sorts of questions or these sorts of queries? Or is it totally obfuscated because it's, Brave is private at the browser level? Do you guys not have any insight into, user data?
We spent a lot of time building out private, privacy-preserving analytics, especially way back in 2017, 18 even. And so, having diagnostic data is super important. And we know aggregate things around query volume, types of queries, things like that. We also know too, on the search side, how many queries are coming up with an AI summary versus not. And then on the Liao side, or browser AI assistant, where a lot of the model selection takes place. It's interesting because we have different cohorts of users, right? We have our main browser that's kind of the release that you get from the website, but we also have a beta and a nightly channel, and those nightly channels are more the token maxer user cohort. They want the latest. They want they're being very manual about things, and so we're seeing. It really depends on the channel, and it depends on the use case. But I think that it's all over the place right now. I mean, we see a lot around search, but we also are trying to build in features that we can learn more about the types of use around as well, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's not like you obviously have things like coding and stuff like that people are using, and our Vantage Point's interesting too because our search API is used across AI for a lot of things, right? Like it's a default in OpenClaw, and so we see a lot of people that are on the dev side that are working around our search API as well. So we do have an interesting an interesting kind of vantage point. I think a lot of what this industry is doing right now is catering to developers because that's where the innovation's happening. And until you hit a major use case that's going to get the market fit level where they're going to lead. I mean, you're starting to see that in some places, but it's still going to be catering to developers for a while.
Yeah. Guys, a general question here is something that I've thought through is the idea of locally run models, because it feels like to truly get privacy preserving AI where, our data, which I think we already know just by, things that come up when people really dig into these terms of service, they realize that, hey, your data, whether you like it or not, you're going to get sold to advertisers, right? Or your data is going to be available. And, if there's something comes in from a law enforcement agency or something, this is subject to subpoenas. And, these are real considerations. People don't want their data, out there floating in the abyss. And it feels as if the only way to truly get privacy preserving AI is to eliminate the cloud environment entirely. If we're sending our data from our local machine up to the cloud, up in the cloud, very funky things can happen. How realistic is locally run AI, and how important is it to run these models locally in order to preserve privacy? Open question for everyone here.
I mean, if you want to run the best open source models locally, this is gonna cost you a lot of dollars. It's I don't know the exact number, but it's more than 100K, for example. If you want to run the full JLM 5.2 or Kimi K3, this is it's tens of thousands of dollars of upfront costs you need to do on your hardware side to be able to run these big models. And so this is where confidential computing kind of lands, right? We offer the same guarantees as running models locally, but in the cloud. So you as a user, as a customer of this service, you have a cryptographic proof that actually there is no way for NEAR AI or any of these privacy preserving solutions to actually see your prompts and the responses from these AI models. And this is where actually most of our clients are coming from, because they realize that if you want the best intelligence, you actually need to have big GPUs, which you cannot run at your place, at least for now. I mean, we've seen that consumer grade hardware is getting better and better, but it's still not there for you to be able to run Kimi K3 or these big models. But if you want to run simple models, the fast ones, then it's possible to run locally, but you just lose a lot of intelligence. That's the downside.
Yeah, Jerry, anything to add there in terms of how you guys are approaching this from the Intel side? Given that maybe you've got a focus on hardware, how are you helping to enable confidentiality? Is running things locally, is it realistic, or is it even important in order to get privacy preserving AI?
I think I actually agree with what Pierre just said, right? From capability perspective, it's probably doable. Run some model locally, right? But it's confidential wise. It's still a challenge. I think even you run some model in the local environment, it's still the challenge. You want to make sure the model you get from wherever you get, right? You needed to make sure it's the known good model. It's a trusted model, right? At this point, you still have the need to somehow to, verify the model, is the model you want to run, right? It's there is no like backdoor, this kind of thing. All those are about how we measure the running environment, right? So at this point, confidential computing technologies still apply, even in the local environment. You still want to run everything in a hardware-backed secure enclave, and whole environment measured can be independently verified, right? I think it's still the same challenge no matter where you run the, model, you know, on-prem, locally, on cloud, on the edge, the same thing. It's the same challenge. Yeah.
And yeah.
Sorry, Robbie. Look, I'm quite curious. So, do you have any like public data of the proportion of people? Because you mentioned at the beginning of this panel that you enable Leo users, right, to use their own models from Leo, which is your AI assistant inside the browser. Do you know like the ratio of people going for this or going for like T solutions that NEAR AI, for example, has on the Brave Leo as a
It's a
provider?
small minority cohort, like most likely single digits, because it most likely from around the folks that are in our nightly channel. But I think that this topic too is one where we might find ourselves having a completely different answer in a couple of years because of just how local models are evolving too. I have a opportunity to talk to a lot of different specialized folks that are working on different types of hardware and things like that, where they have to run local and it has to be very privacy conscious. And this is all early, like on the local side, I think, and right now it doesn't make sense to do it all. I mean, everything that everybody else said earlier around costs and trade-offs is like very valid, basically.
Okay. And so what is the biggest bottleneck here? You mentioned like this thing could change dramatically in the next couple of years. Is it just, user education, more people coming around that, their data is being sold off and they need to take control of that? I think as more people start to use more of these LLMs and they transition from something just like raw search in a browser, they'll realize, like there's people using it as their therapist. Like they're really confiding, sharing very private information about their lives in these things. Is it just a matter of people coming around to the idea that this is being shared and they need to take that into their own hands? Or is there some other bottleneck, whether that's a technical bottleneck or a non-technical one that, we will ultimately solve going forward? What are some of the limitations and the bottlenecks right now to turn on these features for more and more people?
I mean, I think one, and I can just jump in quick on this because I've got a kind of an interesting perspective on it. I think one, like the people are becoming more educated on this stuff. That's true. We're starting to see that in other areas, both with a lot of these like chat control types of things, error verifications, and even things like this whole deflocking thing. Like privacy stuff is becoming more of a thing. But I think that on the business side, it's becoming much more relevant, where people are starting to see that there are real liabilities in just kind of hoping everything works according to a policy, especially when a lot of people start to observe how these policies are actually working in practice when they're evaluating the technology. So I think that those business risks are adding a lot more momentum towards getting these solutions to market faster. And there's a word that keeps getting replied here around like verifiability around and verification around making sure that what you're using is what it really is. And I think that's super valid too. The technical challenges are obviously there as well, but I think that whenever you have this forcing function of business concerns and business risks around these things, it helps to accelerate the adoption on the consumer side too. And the ground up adoption from the consumer side is going to keep becoming a thing. I mean, like when we started in 2016, people were questioning whether people even cared about privacy or not. And he's got like 120 million monthly users now. And so a lot of people move with their feet for one reason or another. But when you really start to see this stuff kick in, it's when businesses have to be concerned, because it really, and they should be. Like, I mean, and the point about the the waiting room and those things earlier, or the doctor's office, right? Like all these different contexts in which people are using these things become liabilities across the board, right? And so we even did some research around this, around prompt injections when agentic browsing first started to hit, and people were just kind of letting things run wild. And there's some serious considerations and risk factors that people need to weigh in. Our research team put out some research around those threats, and et cetera. So I think that the business part is helping to accelerate this a lot. I think that the innovation around cloud compute and attestation and the TE work that's going on is helping too. Just my own personal perspective on this.
Yeah, overall, I do really agree with like Luke. Like at Near AI, like we see the demand for like privacy preserving LM solution like increasing a lot. Like when we started doing this like 2 years ago, the demand wasn't really there. Like we had to really pitch to people what is like what are Ts, what is a secure enclave, what Near AI does, everything. And now people like come to us, right? They are like, oh, we need like a T solution for like our LLM needs, basically. They need AI inference that is privacy preserving. And we really see like the market starting to adopting this, and it's super cool to see, because like finally people see that there are gaps in the biggest players at the moment. And it's a bomb waiting to explode. Like it's just, they have so much data about everybody at the moment. It's insane. Like everybody just shares, as you said, like Robbie and Luke, like people share everything in there. Like it's so dangerous. Like if things goes out, like this data can destroy lives and stuff. And I think people start to realize, and that's it's just it's gonna happen.
Yeah. The last question I have for you guys here is, now, we understand running these things locally is just too high of a barrier to entry, whether it be for cost or skill or setup. What is the low barrier, to entry, easiest way to get set up so that I can continue using and our community, our audience can continue using the tools that they're accustomed to using, but they can do so in a privacy preserving way? Is there an easy tool, add-on, hardware piece that they can now just incorporate into their workflows so that they can flip the switch and turn on privacy?
Gosh, am I going to shill my own bags really hard here? But I would just use Brave. We have like Leo built in. Our privacy model is like best in the market, and you find, and we also have an ear to the ground with our users too. So if there's stuff that they want, we listen and kind of implement that. But I think that's me kind of selling my own bag here a little bit. But yeah, been here doing that for a long time. So.
Yeah, for sure, you can use Brave Leo, but also I want to say that you can use Near AI, which we are one of the providers for Brave Leo, and we empower you to do basically anything. So we have this API, and you can leverage all these like open source models that we host inside TEs, and so you have the same guarantees than running everything locally, and you just pay per token, and it's much cheaper than using the bigger players.
Yeah, and Jerry, what does your stack look like?
I think, from Intel's perspective, our hardware technology, like Intel Trusted Domain Extension, as known as Intel TDX technology, really enable the lift shift deployment model for all the confidential computing workload, include confidential AI workload model, this kind of thing. This significantly lower the technical bar for any team they want to, deploy the confidential AI workload, right? So they don't have to redesign their stack, this kind of thing. So basically, our technology, I think, make the privacy as part of the infrastructure provided layer itself, right? This definitely reduced, I think, the cost and the complexity to, for people to want to try that out. The other thing is on top of that, besides the hardware technology, our group is also delivering a product named Intel Trust Authority, which is independent attestation service. The service itself is free, right? So, for we work with the partner like NEAR AI and a lot of major CSPs and also neo cloud providers to integrate that capability into their confidential computing service, which allows the all basically everyone to try the confidential AI private preserving computing. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Guys, I think that's all the time that we have. Really appreciate you all coming on. This is a deep topic, and it's also an extremely early one. So all of you guys are pioneers in your own right. Appreciate you sharing the insights with us and sharing your unique vantage points. Really appreciate it. Hope to have you guys on again soon. Talk a little bit more about the AI stack.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robbie.
Thank you
See you guys. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. All right, guys, we are going to keep on moving along. Having a fantastic show for you guys so far today. Let's check in on the chat. How are you guys doing? Alpha Rattle, the focus on privacy is the part of what I love about NEAR. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible. I had really no idea that NEAR AI was collaborating with the likes of Intel on the hardware side, Brave on the browser side. NEAR AI is a provider of confidential AI to Brave, which is pretty awesome. Very cool to see that integration on their Leo product. NEAR AI as a Brave Leo backend with TEE guarantees is quietly what the EU AI Act's high-risk system provisions were written to incentivize. It's pretty awesome. Pretty cool to see how NEAR AI is getting implemented into, you've got Leo, Brave, and then you got NEAR AI in the back end. You got the TEEs from Intel. Pretty awesome to see. Luna.eth. Luna.eth is a crazy name. Anything Luna, Terra Luna these days. Data that can destroy lives and people are still just handing it over for free like nothing happened. No, it's pretty insane. People are handing all their data over to AIs. It's pretty nuts. That is why the privacy preserving elements are becoming increasingly important. So very, very cool panel with Intel and Brave, as well as with NEAR AI to learn about how all of them are working together. Let's see, Akan in the chat says, one of the things I love about NEAR is the focus on privacy. Yeah, very, very cool. As we said, NEAR AI is serving as one of the backends for that Brave Leo system. And then you got the Intel TEEs serving as that hardware enclave that helps support the system as well. Last thing we got in the chat here, cryptographic proof that nobody can read your prompts is a generally wild value prop, and it's being explained right now like it's obvious. This is the actual unlock for enterprise AI adoption, and people are still sleeping on it. Yeah, I mean, we heard how high of a barrier of entry it is to run these models locally, but there are enterprises that are very, very conscious of their data. It's very important to them that they don't leak these confidential secrets. And so these are the guys that have the resources and the willpower to deploy and run these things locally. That's where I think it starts. And then over time, we're going to bring these costs down. And I could understand how consumers get access to locally run these things as well over time. In the meantime, we got TEEs and confidential browsers. Guys, we've got our next panel. I think this is one of our last panels of the day, second to last panel of the day, guardrails for agentic commerce. I see these guys already in the back end, so we're going to bring them up in just a second and talk about guardrails for agentic commerce. You guys have heard a lot about this concept here today. Description on this one is static security tests were built for a world where attackers didn't use AI. They do now. Yeah, honestly, it's just been sort of concerning, annoying. Not sure exactly what the adjective is, but it feels like the malicious actors have been using AI more than the ones who are fighting for good. We're going to talk about it. We're going to get guardrails for agentic commerce going here on the show. Let's go ahead and bring up our panelists and get this one cracking. It's a full house. Guys, you're on stage now. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you guys. And so we're gonna get the conversation flow. We're gonna have some fun here. I'm just gonna ask some open-ended questions, guys. So just feel free to just jump in, talk over each other, have a good time. But as I mentioned, we've got guardrails for agentic commerce. We've got Ari from Failsafe, Zaki from Pulse. I know Zaki's got a million things that he's got going at any one time. Cameron from NEAR AI, and Ali from Ledger. So we're gonna talk about it, guys. You know, I'm sure you guys have seen all of the. It felt like there was a just crazy run of exploits, and it was right around the same time that some of these models, these frontier models, were coming out. It feels like we should be using these models for good, not evil, not to be using them for exploits. First, do you think we're now in a place where, you know, we can start to use these models and use them for, you know, agentic commerce? Like, I guess maybe the first question to ask here is, what does the state of agentic commerce look like today? Because we've had a lot of theoretical conversations, but let's just get a little bit more practical. Open question, what is the state of agentic commerce? I know it's general, but we'll hone in. And where, you know, feel free, jump in. Where do you guys think where we are today, and where do you guys each fit into the agentic commerce stack?
I can hop in. Yeah. No, I think right now, by the way, I'm Cameron from NEAR AI. I've been building with NEAR for the last 6 years or so. And where agentic commerce is today is for digitally native things. So things like APIs, I guess like agents paying other agents to do certain crypto related tasks even. But I would say it's really started with digitally native because, you know, all the primitives are there for it. But right now we are, and also like we're starting to see examples with like Mercury and Brex like kind of hit like the mainstream with things like smart routing. Right now with Abound is a company that we're working very closely with, where we're doing smart remittance. So having an agent essentially call an API to get a foreign exchange price to do remittance at the best rate that they can get. So someone can talk in natural language and essentially make, you know, get a better rate for sending money abroad. And so right now it's still these like definitely financial sort of native experiences that are inherently digital, but we haven't seen a ton of real world stuff. You know, obviously there's some example like, you know, almost case studies with convenience stores being completely run by AI, like navigating the supply chain. But honestly, it's a little bit of a pet project rather than anything like, you know, enterprise ready. But we're getting there.
Yep. Ari, I remember we were on stage, I think it was in Miami, and you were you know, discussing the attack benchmark that you had, that a lot of these, you know, these models were starting to get rated against. We were up there with George. I'm just curious, you know, as we move this agentic economy forward, you know, and again, like start to establish some guardrails, but, you know, again, you know, just try to limit the amount of exploits and use these things for the power of good here. What have you found? You know, just give us a catch up. I think that conference was a couple of months ago at this point. Have you seen some adoption, and have you seen some teams start to put into practice, you know, some of these models for the force of ultimately using these things for, you know, powerful technology? You know, what people ultimately want here, not exploits, but, you know, agentic commerce moving forward.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the stuff that we collaborated on together with NEAR was really around the evaluation of claws, right? Different claws, whether it's Iron Claw, Open Claw, Hermes, and while I think originally there was like a ton of security issues with Open Claw and confused deputy problem, I think that all of these platforms are tightening down, and it's really interesting to see frontier labs that are basically, I mean, if you look at OpenAI work, there's Claude work. These are essentially claws, just by another name. So I think putting constraints, putting permissions around the actions that an agent can take is becoming more mainstream. It's
Yeah. Zaki and Ali, you know, what are you guys seeing on the ground? What is the state? Do you think we're still in the, you know, using, there's, you know, AI in the hands of bad actors, and that those guys are still using it more so than the guys that are, you know, the good guys, if you will, or generally?
I don't think that's true. Yeah, I don't think that's true at all. I think we're in a weird, just in, you know, having having been, I guess my like multiple takes are, one is you are seeing a massive acceleration in terms of what can be done in terms of building on-chain applications that are like hardened in a way that would never have been possible before. I would point to like what Zcash is doing with Ironwood as a great example. It's probably, I would say, the kind of the high watermark right now of what is happening in the crypto industry in terms of like using AI to drive like defensive programming and building a blockchain release that is very built around building things defensively using AI to build defense. But I think you have this. I think that you're going to have a whole generation of new DeFi projects that also lever it. But I think that like one of the things that is also probably the biggest challenge right now is, I think since October, from like all of the experiments that I've done under a variety of different hats, whether it's sommelier or the stuff I work on with NEAR, it's been very clear that agents are very well positioned for you to access, to like act for you on chain. Like they can do trades for you, they can enter into DeFi positions for you, they can monitor those DeFi positions for you. But the hard part of putting these things into production has always been security. Like the work that Ari has done on Attack Bench, like the TLDR of what it says is that everything we know, like we do not know how to make an agent that reliably acts in the user's interest and isn't subverted by the internet. So then what the question is like, what are the compartments that you build into the system? How do you compartmentalize the system so that there is a defense in depth from between what the agent like what the agent is sort of communicating and giving you telling you to signing on your behalf. Various use cases in various flows are there, but how do you have defense in depth so that you don't get that subverted message that just sends all your money to North Korea?
Mm-hmm. How do we do that? Like, is it in the harness? Is it in, the application providing some of these parameters? Ollie, I want to hear from you on the hardware side. Like, is there hardware constraints that we can put on these things to effectively harness them a little bit more, securely? What are you guys seeing on the ground?
That's the most interesting part. I want to touch on what Ari mentioned, because when Cloud Co-work and now OpenAI work came out, it's not being AI in the hand of bad actors. It's candy in the hands of babies. All of these new people building AI agents with all of these tools, that the barrier of entry is so low that everybody is just shipping. And the last thing they think about is the security. Everybody's talking about the infra. Nobody's talking about who's holding the keys. I'm super bullish on AI thinking, on AI proposing. But the fact that is missing is we should keep the humans in control, not as a policy, as an enforcement. So the only thing that we always Ledger is a beacon of safety in the crypto world. So now we are pivoting hard to the AI side, because we were seeing the same thing that was happening in 2021. When you open Twitter in 2021, everybody was getting hacked. It was so it was every day it was on the timeline, people getting hacked. We're gonna see the same thing, unfortunately, with the AI agents. If people, they are not going to take security more serious, and that's where the hardware comes in, because AI can hack software, AI cannot touch hardware, and that's the part that we enforce very hard.
Yeah. Ari, I'm sure you've thought deeply about this, because, I think it's probably true to your nature, not just to put out the benchmark and then hands off. Like, you put out the benchmark, you draw a conclusion, and then the idea is like, let's do something about it, right? So if the TLDR is like, hey, like there just isn't a harness, there isn't guardrails out there that can prevent things from the internet, what is the best that we can get? What would you suggest to teams that are looking at building out more of these agentic transaction flows? What can they do to help, secure that system as best as possible?
A great question. I think it first starts with an objective evaluation of your system. So, this is kind of the motivation that we had together with NEAR, like when we first looked at evaluating different claws, most of the stuff, pretty much all the stuff that we saw were just a bunch of static tests, and we felt that that's really insufficient. That in practice, attackers have been already for some time leveraging LLMs and doing intelligent attacks, and actually seeing the inference that's being done by the other side. So I think it first should start with an objective evaluation of your own system. So attack bench is meant to do that, but either that or some variant of that where you have an adversarial attacker, right? So the attacker is an LLM and it gets a bunch of turns, and it actually has visibility into your agent, into the reasoning of your agent, and then it'll change tags, it'll try different things. Trying different configurations of that, and there's no single silver bullet. So it starts with that, and then defense in depth. There's any number of mechanisms. There's some really interesting, what I thought was quite novel and clean approach that Ironclaw had with permissioning. It was with right permissioning, had very strong controls on that. But basically, it's additively multiple layers, defense in depth, starting with like a clean visibility of your own system, understanding it's don't just run a bunch of static tests. They passed with a particular LLM configured. You call it good and ship, right? So it's a combination of these different things.
Yeah. Zaki and Cameron, what is the status of Ironclaw? Because it felt like it came out and OpenClaw was kind of taking the world by storm. Ironclaw provided this more secure harness for Claude. What has been the movement on it in the last few months?
I could take my perspective on it. So like one of the things that Ironclaw's security model sort of enables that is, I think, kind of unique is it allows you to run these kind of organizational level clause rather than just the sort of individual user claw. And so, like one of the things that we've always one of the things that's always a struggle with software is like security is not a feature. Sometimes it's table stakes, it's trust, but nobody ever adopts a piece. Like there's a very small group of people who are like, I will take the worst thing for the more secure thing. They are like, I want the best thing, but I want it also to be secure. So what you got to ask yourself is, okay, we invested all of this enormous amount of time and energy in building all these security features into Ironclaw. Like how do you take those security features and then do a product that is 10x better than what else is there? And so the product team, I'm a maintainer on Ironclaw, but there are lots of other people who are doing far more work than I am on this right now. The product team has been really trying to push this architecture of the sort of organizational level instance. And like you see, the both in the open source world, like Paradigm has the Centaur thing, and then Anthropic has this Claude tag kind of concept. We're trying to build out this like organizational level Ironclaw experience. So basically you can deploy it to like an entire company, and it can operate in like a coherent manner. So that's like kind of where we're going on the product direction.
Yeah, exactly. Like the multi-tenant instance, what we call it internally, and you can spin up this multi-tenant instance with specific skills, tools, workflows per department. And so if I'm talking to a government and they, are responsible for pension payouts, like everyone who is automatically working in pension payouts already comes with the exact tools that they use and workflows to make their job easier. And we're currently adopting this internally inside of NEAR Foundation. The goal is not to replace the team. Let me be super clear about that. The goal is to empower them to do a whole lot more work than they were able to do before and kind of take the monotony out of filling out the legal request form to, start a contracting process and have most of that be agentic, depending on the call transcript that you had with the partner to then even do forecast calculations to determine the deal value, to determine how this sits in a pipeline. These sort of things take teams a lot of time and energy, and this can all be automated. and it can automatically be stood up within an organization's multi-tenant instance. So where things are today is we're making it a whole lot more reliable. We're introducing like self-learning loops, so it's constantly learning on the traces that it's developed, and then even giving users the option to, I mean, I don't know if we should talk too much about this, but there's an open source repo, so I guess we could, allow people to use those traces to improve their workflows and even potentially like monetize them later. And so there's a lot of really interesting stuff being baked into a new release that is slowly but surely coming together. And then we're just taking this and applying it. Like we are showing, not telling, through use cases that require this level of sensitivity. Because every large organization wants these claws. It's just that every time it goes to the CISO, they're like, absolutely not. We can't touch this with a 10-foot pole. It's going to leak our credentials to the LLM. There's all this hallucination risk, all this stuff. So we're just proving it out with partners. One of them, again, is this like Abound use case, which I think is super compelling because this is an agent that is actually using money to send it abroad to non-crypto native people, just like everyday like people that need remittances. And then we could just rinse and repeat this across like every single remittance company or something like that. And so there's a lot of exciting stuff here, and I would rather show, not tell, and that showing is coming very soon.
And so is the idea here that and I want to just make sure that I understand the implementation process here. But when you say trace, this is essentially the concept, if I understand correctly, that, you put it in a prompt and you sort of know what you're going to get out. Like right now, LLMs are almost entirely probabilistic. I could put something in, Cameron, you could put something in, and we could put in the exact same thing, but the same inputs could lead to two different outputs because it's a probability that we get, a certain thing each. Mm-hmm. But by using this trace, is that taking these LLMs and making them deterministic for these large organizations so that there's a little bit more of an understanding in terms of, what they can expect, and that therefore you take out some of the variability of these models, and therefore that determinism creates the guardrails?
I'm happy to talk about this. Zaki, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I would position it very differently. So if you look at there's this whole concept of post-training, and post-training sort of took off at the end of 2024 with OpenAI released O1 and DeepSeek V3 came out, or DeepSeek's R1 came out, which both sort of showed the whole industry what is possible with essentially giving, when you are developing the reasoning capability and the ability to be a useful worker based off of lots of examples of work. So right now, there's the way in which all of the labs that are out there are all improving improving models for different work tasks, and is by feeding them examples of work. And there's this whole data economy that has emerged about it. And then there's this whole world that has emerged where you have teams like Thinking Machines and Prime Intellect, which have built entire platforms for companies to take open source models and then their own proprietary traces and build models that are very good at their workflow. But this basically right now is where we're at in terms of how we're. This seems to be the sort of industry consensus of how we're getting to AGI right now. It's sort of somewhat brute forcing our way through lots of examples of doing interesting work, and then having the models post-trained over them to get them to the point where they become sort of human equivalent workers. So this is like really fundamental, just sort of the whole path to AGI that we're on.
Okay. So the trace, the deterministic part of this is actually separate from the model, and then we apply it to
you
the
imagine
model.
Okay, so I am trying to take model N, version N, and people are using it, or people are using frontier models, proprietary models, all of these things. It's all, the trace is the prompt, the response from the tool calls that the model selected, and then the question, and then so like now you're trying, and then any corrections that the user made. And
Okay.
corrections are super valuable because when you're training the next version of the model, what you're actually asking the question is, okay, like the model made a mistake or like got to the right answer, but not in the most efficient way, or made a mistake and the user had to steer them back onto course. Maybe they had to steer them a lot. Maybe it never got there. And now if you can take that trace as a target for post-training the model, you can make the next version of the model be like, okay, did it do better on this prompt or did it do worse? And then, adjust the weights until it does better.
And in theory, we could actually use attack bench as like kind of this, we could like send the adversary, we could judge it, and then we could use some sort of like fixes that we implement, and then we could trace that again. We could, in theory, get more and more secure models because they're better at defending against these adversaries.
I want to hear Ari's take.
Yeah, I mean, it's attack bench is actually it's a combo. It tests both the agent and the LLM. It was really interesting the findings we had. It was kind of unexpected. It was really in some scenarios you would have for some type of attacks, it was the LLM that came through and saved the day. In other cases, it was the agent. In other cases, both missed it. So I think it can, for what you described, certainly it can help in after you've post-trained the model and it's in the context of this particular agent, you can run the same workflow, adversarial workflow, and see what happens. It can be used as a tool that way, but you probably also separately, you probably want to have a separate test bed that's just focused on the LLM as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is deep stuff. So I feel like we could chat for a significantly longer time about this. The last question I have is just around bottlenecks. Like, all you guys are here. You're building through tough market conditions out there. What is the limiting factor right now? Just open question to everyone. Where should we be focusing our attention to ultimately, make these things more secure, enable the agentic economy on chain, and increase user adoption tenfold? Is there a common bottleneck that we can be, focusing on, or generally, what do you guys think is the limiting factor?
I would love to jump in here if everyone's okay. One of the things that we are seeing, just to continue what Cameron was saying, is showing rather than telling. If we want the agentic commerce to widespread scale in the scale that we are expecting it to be, the security should scale at the same speed. But we are not seeing that at the moment, because every time security is the boring subject, and everybody goes to security when they encounter a hack, encounter an exploit. And the compromise part is the hard part. So building in public can help that bottleneck a lot. Every one of us, every other brand, we are focusing on security. We are building very nice tech. If we can share it more, show it more, and make it more public, the eyes of the normal people who are playing around with agents, they get more aware of what's happening and what's coming, and keep them more secure, and go out and look for the infos that are being built and they don't know about it. I think that's a major bottleneck in the security right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, feel free to jump in. What do you guys think? Bottlenecks, limiting factors?
There are a lot of bottlenecks. There is the whole identity reputation piece that I think is only really going to be important once we have useful agents. And that useful agent is requiring a sort of new UI, because candidly, it's a lot easier for me to go buy something on Amazon than it is for me to go chat with my agent to make sure it's like buying the right thing. And so we completely need to redefine like the context window and like how memory is managed to actually make that agentic experience personalized. Because if I have to do more work for this agent to act on my behalf, I'm not going to do it. So like I'd say memory is like one of the biggest issues here. And it is being addressed through these agent frameworks. And then another huge issue, especially for crypto, and this I've not seen an elegant solution here, is around chargebacks because humans hallucinate. You know, I buy the wrong stuff all the time. Let me make, if I was paying in crypto, and the AI model is going to hallucinate as well. But if I was paying crypto, that money is gone. And so I need some sort of chargeback mechanism or some level of insurance, or the vendor needs to be able to also accept payments privately. No legitimate like vendor wants to have all of their customer user information like on a public immutable ledger and how much things cost. And so I think this is where like confidential intents really comes into play. Like, and vendors should be able to accept any asset on any chain. Like if I wanted to pay New York Times and New York Times only accepts USDC on Solana and I only have Dogecoin on Dogecoin, I should be able to, my agent should be able to pay for that article or pay per crawl or per scrape via my Dogecoin. And that's where near intents and kind of how this whole thing kind of plugs in together. And it needs to be private. And so you start adding all these things together with solid benchmarks and eval frameworks. It starts with the benchmark, which is what I love the Failsafe work. But that actual agent framework is critical to make sure like secrets don't leave the like doesn't touch the LLM. Make sure that like there's all this stuff. But I would say like the main issue is probably chargebacks and insurance because these things are going to mess up. And transaction simulation, Zaki, I don't know if you want to plug in there, but it's a big one.
Well, yeah, I think like one of the, I think the ledger people are obviously very knowledgeable about the challenge of that blind signing has been as an industry for all of these years. In some ways, AI agents kind of compound the problem because you have this kind of what you see is what you sign thing. And you can imagine attackers that are going to try to subvert your ledger is telling you, you're sending money to your Coinbase account and like it's actually to another address. So there's a lot of new attack surface area and there's a huge need to sort of to build a secure channel to the user to say like, okay, before I say I'm going to sign this, like what is this doing? How do we know that the address is involved, the contracts are involved, the effects of the transaction are, and things like near intents actually like make this much easier in many ways because intents have like very encapsulated effects. Like you're like swap, this much USDC for Zcash or Bitcoin. Like it has a very confined possible set of state transitions, whereas a transaction that interacts with the smart contract, actually it's a very challenging thing. So like one of the parts that you need to have is like is an ability to sort of know your contract, simulate the outcomes, all of these things in a way that then gets sent where the user gets clear visibility. And you can do things like, make sure that the context window that is presenting the transaction to the user did not share anything with the context window that generated the transaction, stuff like that.
Yeah, and if I could add one, I mean, there's like Cameron said, there's a lot of different challenges, but if I had to pick one, the thing that kind of bugs me the most is so the current mechanism. Like, how do you deal with tough decisions? Well, you ask the human to answer it for you, right? So give me permissions to do this. And this gets abused to no end. And then we've seen, some application of this for the last 3 decades. It was just in different contexts. Ask the human. Eventually, the human just clicks away, and all is good. But it's especially important in this context because you have an intelligent agent that's making a decision, and you don't want to be. I mean, if you ask the human every time, then you're degrading the whole value prop of the agent itself. So I think there's a lot of interesting possibilities and work that can be done in that area, making automating that decision, having an agent, if you will, that is specifically trained to make the right kind of decisions for you. Easier said than done. But I think that's a particularly key area to address.
Yeah, or at least an agent that is able to say like, "Hey, is this a decision for an agent or a decision for a human?" and directing it accordingly. Guys, thanks so much. Really appreciate you joining today. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, I mean, this is something that I think is still extremely early and we're going to hear a lot more about. So appreciate you sharing your insights, and we'll see you all again soon.
Thank you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. See you.
Bye.
Cheers, guys. All right. We are on to our last but not least, our final panel. Pretty fascinating conversations there. I mean, it's tough to really understand, you know, at some points it's like, hey, you know, we're ready to go and transact all these things on chain. Other times it's like, these things don't have any guardrails. Like, we need to do some serious work in order to get these things up to a place where they are secure enough to make transactions on chain. There's some real considerations here. We're getting some G-nears in the chat. Let's see. Liam Foster, adversarial red teaming as a continuous post-training loop is actually the most interesting security primitive I've heard in a while. Long volatility on any infra play that figures out automated attack defense cycling before the big labs do. Yeah, it does feel like there's some real innovative work being done here, and the big labs could be, you know, taking it and paying for it. Alex Web3 says, brute forcing our way to AGI by showing models enough examples of human work. That's the plan. We have named this a consensus. Yeah, I mean, you guys have seen all the data labeling, everything that happens there. Johnny Pan in the chat, feeding models examples of work to make them better workers is just apprenticeship. We invented this in 1400. Well, you know, AGI or AI got invented couple of years ago. Is at year 0, and you know, now we may very well be in year 1400 of AI models. Alex.eth, company-wide AI agent deployments with coherent behavior is a nice goal. Coherent across whose threat model exactly? That was one of the cool things about the benchmark from Failsafe. You know, these guys are doing the benchmarking to understand, you know, what is coherent? What is the threat model? How much of a threat really is it? As far as, you know, what we do after the fact to protect against those threats, you know, that's a whole nother conversation. You red teams in the chat, defense in depth is correct. And also every team ships after one config passes. Lots of good comments here in the chat. Hardware constraints as the enforcement layer for AI safety is genuinely interesting. Very, very cool to see. Zcash Ironwood is cool. Lots of great comments in the chat. Appreciate you guys rocking with us. We are on to our final panel of the day. Last but certainly not least, lots of really, really great improvements happening on the AI agentic front. We're protecting these things. We're making them more secure. NEAR AI is leading the way. We also have NEAR Intense leading the way. We've talked about, you know, the intent world, how NEAR Intense is working on this. We've also talked about the harnesses. We've got George and Gordon in the back. We're going to bring them up in just a moment. If you guys were in Miami, you saw George and Ari were on the stage. We were talking about Attack Bench. We just had the conversation on guardrails. This next panel is going to be around private payments, and we're going to get into it. And we're going to get into specifically what an agent pays in whatever it's holding. A vendor gets paid in whatever they actually want on whatever chain they prefer. NEAR Intense and Circle are building the infrastructure that makes that exchange seamless and private. So let's go ahead and bring them up. We're going to get into our final panel of the day because we've really had a conversation all across the stack. We've talked about, you know, what it takes to make these agentic payments private. We talked about confidential intents. And so it feels like this is a nice wrap up to talk about what's practically happening now. We've got George and Gordon on the show. We've got them up on the stage. Guys, it's a pleasure to host you guys. Welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here, Robbie.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thanks for vibing out with us today. Circle, you know, obviously a Goliath in the payments and the stablecoin space. George, you know, you're one of the leaders on NEAR AI, representing both NEAR AI and NEAR Intense. And so, you know, this feels like a good wrap up. I actually want to share a thesis with you guys that I've been thinking about on the show. And I'm curious how you guys see this, and, you know, maybe this is going to lead into our stablecoin conversation here. The idea that I've been kind of toying around with, and I'd love just a critique from you guys, is that, you know, the consumer behavior on the stablecoin front, when I go buy a coffee, I tap my card, right? Everyone's used to tapping their card. That consumer behavior is probably going to stay the same for a long time. I'm just going to continue to tap my card. On the merchant side, they get shown their bank account balance. When they make a sale, their bank account balance ticks up. They don't really know, okay, my bank is in, 5-year treasuries or 10-year treasuries, and they have mortgages out to these payments and whatnot. All the merchant sees is this number on the screen when they log into their online banking. And all the consumer does is tap their card. That's their consumer behavior. It's on the back end. It's up to the banks that are going to decide to manipulate their balance sheet in such a way where they're going to start to allocate more of their assets into stable coins. Not going to touch the consumer behavior, not going to touch the merchant behavior. All of that is going to be obfuscated away, but we can still onboard trillions and trillions of dollars of stable coins at the bank level. And to the consumer and to the merchant, all of this is behind the scenes. We just see number. That is what we know as money. It's just the number on the screen. The stable coins are handed by the people that work on the balance sheet. Do you guys think this is, a fair thesis? Do you think this is going to play out on the stablecoin side? Maybe we can just set the tone here for how much of the adoption curve is going to be taken by the institutions versus by the consumers or the merchants when it comes to the stablecoin adoption, and we'll let that set the tone for private stablecoins, private payments, how these things play out over time. What do you guys think?
So I'll start by coming from a regulated stablecoin side, that the most important part as a form of money is the acceptance of that instrument with no questions asked. That's kind of what defines to be truly a payment instrument, that the merchant receiving it does not question, is this instrument going to be safe? Is it going to be stable? So that's why Circle operates well within the regulatory parameter and within the broader financial system to offer that one-to-one redemption, to offer that seamless experience across also multiples of jurisdictions across the world, multiple financial centers. And that is the seamless experience that we hope certainly eventually consumers will feel as well when they pay, and the merchants will feel as well when they see their bank account or stablecoin account or neobank account tick up. Hopefully tick up a little bit more, because it will make things more efficient, and it will be overall cheaper for merchants. So we're providing that core foundation in terms of safety and payments.
To what Gordon's saying, I agree with your premise, Robbie, that I think one of the statements I like to meditate on sometimes is Marshall McLuhan's famous saying that the medium is the message, which is like this idea that essentially the interface with which we interact with products shapes us, and in turn we shape the tools that we end up using, right? So your example of like buying coffee by tapping a phone to actually purchase the coffee, I think that is the minimum requirement needed for really good payment products to take off. It's got to be at least as good as the current state of the products. I think there's an opportunity to make things substantially better with both stablecoins and private stablecoins, both in terms of the user interface as well as what happens behind the scenes for merchants as well as payment processors. But that's a long conversation we can have at this point in time, or at a later point in time as well.
Yeah, there's very real limitations to the current dynamic in which that tapping card takes place. I still go in places, usually smaller shops, and they say it's a $10 minimum to use a credit card, or if you use cash, you get a discount. If you use a card, there's going to be a service charge or these sorts of things. And it feels as if bringing down credit card processing fees is the way to do that. And how do we bring those fees down? Well, it's stable coins. And so, we can make this a regular, stable coin conversation, but I think there's plenty of interesting things to talk about on the agentic side as well. I guess, the one limitation is that the agents themselves, right? The previous conversation, I guess, just helped me realize like how, we're still lacking guardrails. And George, I remember this from, when you were up there on the stage with Ari and we were talking about these benchmarks and how these things, are still susceptible to some of these adversarial attacks, and how, it is still somewhat insecure that these things are agentically doing this. Maybe you could just, George, you can just give us a quick status update. where are we in the agentic world? Because I'm getting some mixed reviews on, how much agentic transactions have really taken off, where we are today, and ultimately what we can do to push things forward. But first, where do you see us right now? What is the state of the agentic economy, and how safe, how secure, how real is it today?
I think the question about security and how real the agentic economy is has to go back to kind of we're in a technology war, both in terms of people building products and attackers of those products. And to look at it as a static state, as a fixed point in time, ignores the fact that what matters is the larger, longer trajectory we're looking at in terms of actually how we're looking at building safe and secure products. One of the things that NEAR has been sort of looking into and working on for a period of time has been formal verification of code, right? That is something I think we can make a decent amount of headways into actually making sure that products and software are secure. Another example is working with folks like the partners we've worked on in terms of creating really, really top quality security benchmarks. It's really hard to gauge how secure a product is unless you have benchmarks for it, right? That's been something that we've worked on before and we're continuing to work on going forward to improve security not only at the harness level, but also evaluating what we can do in terms of the interactions with the different models as well. To your original question about how much agentic transactions have taken off, I think we're still very early, Robbie. Right now, it's at the point where we're building products, really finding out where there's strong product market fit for those products. That's a question we have to answer in a definitive and strong way before you're going to see meaningful, large adoption or increases in transaction volumes for agents.
Yep, makes sense. And these things are both extremely early on the stablecoin front, on the AI, the agentic front. But ultimately, these things are converging. We see the trajectory is inevitable. Now it's just about accelerating this because we realize that this is technologically more efficient, it's innovative, and as a believer in technology myself, capital wants to be free. It tends to get proliferated towards the most frictionless, the most efficient route possible. And so I think this is ultimately where we're headed. We can all see where we're headed. It's just about how quickly we can get there. Gordon, from the Circle side, do you agree? Is it still extremely early? What has been the traction that you're seeing? You guys are big proponents, X402, nano payments, these sorts of things. Where do you see us on the agentic payments pathway, and what can we do to accelerate our journey along this path?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we are early, but I would caution that it oftentimes really, really hard to estimate, especially these exponential technologies, especially in terms of AI, right? I think a lot of people, especially in San Francisco, believe that we're on the verge of AGI in the next couple of years, call it 1 to 3 years type of range. Then afterwards, anything could happen. You would imagine that agents would be driving a large portion, if not a vast proportion of economic activities on the internet. When that happens, when you have economic activities and exchange of value has to occur at the same time because you can't just provide the services without collecting the payment, collecting the fees. So right now we are building the primitives. As you mentioned, X402 is something that we're really proud of because I think it's something like 99.9%, 99 point some percent of X402 settlement happens in USDC. We've been actively working on the agent wallet, giving wallets to AI agents so they can use it securely for payments. Nano payments, another area in which paying for small value transactions, whether it's for API calls, inference, data, we just see that being a necessity for AI agents to function well in both the current system, but also in this future AGI world. And I think it's just hard for human to grasp how fast things are changing. This exponential curve that's about to happen, we're at the inflection point at this point.
Yeah. And I just looked up a quick X402 dashboard, x402scan.com. I think this says 18 million transactions. it still says $860,000 of volume, not a ton of volume, but a lot of transactions flowing through here. And I do think it shows, the power here is in a lot of nano payments. There's a lot of opportunity here to scale. And I think there are, use cases that become available that previously weren't available. Today we had people talking about, streaming for API feeds, making payments based on calls. The same could be true if, rather than the typical, monthly subscription model, we can seriously invert, some of these business models on their head, and everything can sort of become on demand. I think there's a lot of opportunities with streaming payments this way as well. This becomes available with stable coins. And so, as you guys are continuing to accelerate in this direction, it seems as if privacy is going to be an extremely important piece of this. It's going to be essential for agentic commerce. These things are just table stakes at this point. The other thing that I like to think about here, because I think it is extremely early, but I can't help but think that this is going to become more adopted over time, is it is the product over at NEAR that has, it allows you to ask or essentially buy like agentic labor, and you can use, payments for these things. Just, thinking through some of the use cases here, why is privacy so important? And how have you been able to implement privacy into the stack so that, as you're making these transactions, private payments become ubiquitous and table stakes in agentic commerce? Open question to both of you guys.
Yeah. On the NEAR side, I think one of the things we see is that for anything that you do that is potentially sensitive, whether they're financial transactions or buying services, privacy ends up being a critical primitive. Do you really want to broadcast your trades or the services that you're purchasing or the goods you're purchasing to the broader world? I think none of us probably want to do that, right? So we see that having that as a really critical part of this. The way that we've seen the critical elements of how do you create a better AI agentic economy is having a number of core primitives, including privacy being a critical one. So one is privacy. Another one that we've ended up building as a core primitive is private inference, confidential inference running through trust execution environments. We think that not only does the inference matter a lot, but also the agent harness you use matter a lot. So that is the reasoning behind building Ironclaw Robbie, which I know we've discussed before. So if you take a step back and you have transaction infrastructure that's capable of being private, you have inference that's capable of being private and secure, and you have agents that are capable of being private and secure. We think those three components are the key three components of building a powerful, valuable, private and secure agentic economy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's incredible to see. Gordon, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, we also very much believe privacy is a core primitive that's needed, especially because we work with so many of the regulated financial institutions. Both people who are exploring the AI side, but just real transactions. Yesterday we were part of this larger DTCC test of set of tokenized asset transactions, and USDC was used as the cash leg. Of course, in any regulated financial transactions, you want to maintain privacy, confidentiality, but also have a reporting obligations and reporting or the obligation to respond to regulators when the need calls for some level of reporting. So it's a hard balance to balance, but it is something that we think deep and hard about, and we basically set a framework that's in a way similar to traditional finance. You want certain transactions, especially your own payments and institutional level payments, to be generally private. At the same time, you don't want to facilitate illicit transactions that are that's just harmful for society. And so we are also working on our privacy, which is also taking a TE approach on making transactions private.
Yeah. Okay. And I think just through all the conversations I've had today with several great panelists, it is becoming evident how important privacy is. And this is something that spans both the consumer side, the merchant side, but also institutional, retail, on several different dimensions. several dimensions have, they hold privacy to a high regard. One of the things that came up, I asked the previous panel about, what are some of the largest bottlenecks, some of the most limiting factors that we currently have in the agentic economy to ultimately accelerate on this path. One of the bottlenecks that was brought up was around chargebacks. Essentially, there is going to be some early growing pains with, agents going out there making transactions. If we want to set these things loose, they're going to learn a lot, but they're going to have to fail and make mistakes in order to do that, just like us. And so, when they make something that is, has to get returned or charged back or something like this, if we're using stable coins for this, it's kind of like you're kind of SOL, like you kind of send the crypto, it ends up in the other wallet. There's really no clawback mechanism for that. Gordon, I take it you guys are probably thinking through this, big proponents of seeing this agentic economy take off. How are you thinking through what agentic commerce looks like in practice, clawback mechanisms, these sorts of things, as we move this forward?
That's a great question. So first of all, I want to separate the settlement layer, which is about settlement finality, making sure the transaction is actually going through, versus the application layers on top, which could include escrow services, could include dispute mechanisms. Those could be in the form of smart contracts, along with potentially third parties. That would allow things like chargeback, things in the escrow type of nature. But that's all building on top of a very solid foundation of finalized settlement. So those two are distinct, and we have done work on both fronts, on both strengthening the settlement finality of USDC, but also at the same time, some work on escrow smart contracts. How do you actually enable this? I think at the end of the day, AI agents, if they are operating in the real world, handling large values of transfers, not just nano payments, they need to basically have a combination of identity and liability. Right? Identity meaning that you can identify, even if you cannot issue an ID to an agent per se, but having some way of tracing it back to someone that ultimately is responsible. And liability as a way of being able to provide that it's some way of clawing back, right? If AI agent misbehaves, perhaps you can slash a pool of asset that the AI agent holds. Not so dissimilar to how things work in real life with humans.
Yep. Yeah, it makes sense, and I'm excited to see some of these different design approaches take shape. Some of this. One of the greatest things about this industry I love so much is we can see experimentation in the open, for all to see. We can all learn from each other's mistakes and ultimately build a better industry that way. Guys, I know we're running up on time. Last question I have for you is around essentially just tracking this to understand how far along on this journey we are, to see, are we accelerating? Are we making the right design choices? What metrics should we be tracking? I obviously on stable coins, I know, we've got, the entire stablecoin industry, Circle makes up a very significant part of that. I think we're somewhere around like 300 billion in total stable coins in circulation right now. We talked about X402, closing in, I believe, on 1 million, but 20 million transactions. What are some of the metrics that you're tracking just to understand where the agentic economy is at? Because if we're just tracking stable coins, that's so broad, probably doesn't capture agentic economy, extremely well. We could be tracking X402, but that's probably too narrow. What are some of the metrics that we should be tracking to really get a sense of how far along the agentic economy is, and that way we can continue to keep tabs on progress here?
A spicy, perhaps counterintuitive take here, Robbie, which is I think all quantitative metrics that we can track is largely backwards looking. The most interesting data that I'm looking for is qualitative, intuitive data, which is more forward looking. So all three of us are at the intersection of doing a lot of work in both crypto and AI. All three of us also span both enterprise and consumers. How much of our day-to-day, call it commercial transactions do we have currently handled by agents? I'd suspect very little. So when we get to the point where we see actually real important problems that agentic commercial transactions are solving for us, that is the most important intuitive data point that we can see that's forward-looking. And after we see that, we will eventually see those numbers show up in backward-looking transaction volumes.
That's very well put. I think I absolutely agree with that. I think there's a lot of AI-assisted transactions. Think of the last time you bought something because you took an AI suggestion. There's a conversion of how do you actually convert that to a full agentic type of payment. But I think there are some numbers, as we go along, we could look at, right? I've been looking at the percentage of transactions that is mediated by smart contracts. It's a broad proxy, but a lot of those are DeFi contracts. But it's something around 70% of transactions are mediated by smart contracts already, right? Again, if you take agentic to be a broader sense of programmable and smart contract mediated, and maybe some of the agents are doing DeFi transactions. Another metric that I've been looking at is the amount of small transactions under $1. That's also at least provides some signals about not just adoption of X402, but just the value of small transactions, how they add up.
Yep. I just thought of one more, and I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. And we are continuing to see agentic commerce explode. I want to ask about how stablecoins are relative to credit cards that also may be adopting agentic workflows, because I know earlier we kind of talked about credit card processing fees and bringing those down, and maybe stablecoins can help with that. And we see like the likes of Visa and MasterCard, start to implement a stablecoin strategy, but also start to implement an agentic strategy. I guess this is mostly directed at Gordon, but George, I'm curious for your thoughts too. Like, what direction do you think these guys go? Like, Visa, MasterCard, are they going deeper in one direction or the other? How do you think this progresses?
I think the card networks, if you think about what really draw people to it, is there's specific incentive structure for essentially the interchange fees and kickback to consumers in the form of rewards, right? It's a very specific, well-designed mechanism, incentive structure that draws in the users that are reward sensitive, and kind of the merchants are less reward sensitive and much more, or less cost sensitive and much more sensitive to adoption. On the stablecoin side, you can think of as broadly generic programmable asset, right? You can make those same incentives work, but you can also program a number of other well thought out incentives and test out different type of incentive and mechanisms. I think that would drive adoption, right? It's not just one single set of rules, but rather you can optimize, tailor it to your merchant need, design the best incentive structure that works, for the specific use case. And that's what's more powerful about it.
Yeah, I plus one to everything Gordon said. I think that there's a lot of advantages of essentially what we have in the broader stablecoin world. But probably the two or three most powerful advantages, one is the ability to do structurally lower fees, and second is just programmability. You can do programmability in traditional finance, the traditional payment world, but just so much harder. Like bringing the actual difficulty of creating programmatic finance, programmatic payments, bringing the difficulty down by, say, an order of magnitude just unlocks so much more potential.
Yeah, well said. I'm sure you guys saw this, Stripe Advent bid to take PayPal. I'm just curious, do you guys have any thoughts on this? Any reactions? What is this? It's net positive? Do you think it goes through? What does it mean for the future of payments if it does go through? What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's I haven't thought too much about it, but it's certainly there is value to be had in their respective businesses, and I think everyone recognizes the value of the payment system and the network effect you can establish, and this is why it's so important to have a both well-regulated product, but one that has the depth and liquidity that's needed to enable broad adoption.
Yeah, I don't have too much context behind this either, Robbie, but I presume that part of this is just the broader consolidation happening in parts of the industry right now.
Yeah, makes sense, guys. Appreciate you taking the time, staying a little bit longer with me, answering the questions here, and fighting the good fight. Putting in the good work. You guys are absolutely crushing on both sides. I mean, Circle, Goliath, and stablecoins. NEAR, obviously on the AI front as well as the intense front, absolutely crushing on all fronts there. Hope to see you guys again soon. And appreciate you guys taking the time and wrapping up virtual NEAR Day.
Thank you.
See you next time. Thanks, guys. There you have it. That wraps us up. Circle and George from NEAR AI, NEAR Intense. What a show, guys. I'm zoned. I'm a bit cooked. Just several great conversations. I feel like I learned a ton about the agentic economy, where we are right now. Appreciate you guys rocking with us. We've got, just great combos, great asks, great questions in the chat. Jordan, regulation, liquidity, network depth. Yeah, that covers about every buzzword except actually telling us anything. Man, I guess you weren't watching the rest of the stream, buddy. Bashtik from NEAR Legion. Alfredo, can another token be used apart from stable coins? Absolutely. I think we're going to see NEAR Intense be a vehicle that can use pretty much any token. If the merchant, the seller wants stable coins, they can get it. The buyer can use whatever token they want. You just swap it on the way. Stablecoins is a programmable incentive layer. It's actually a genuinely good frame, but the reason interchange works is decades of habit and locked-in reward psychology. You don't just reprogram consumer behavior by making the asset flexible. Completely agree. Had someone early in the Rollups history tell us consumer behavior takes a long time to change. It really doesn't change very easily. It's better to just keep consumer behavior the same and implement a cheaper, better, faster solution while maintaining consumer behavior. Shout out OX Luna. Shout out Sapper, Cell, Private AI is NEAR AI. Visa and MasterCard have been implementing stablecoin strategy since like 2021. Still waiting for that to mean anything at scale. Completely agree. But you know what? It's slowly, then all at once. And that's what we're seeing play out in real time. Bashtik, how will the agent's actions be monitored? Yeah, that's what we're wondering ourselves, because these harnesses are not really doing the trick. We need a way of keeping a human in the loop, but ultimately we just need a way of these things just doing a better job. Like, I just want the agent to do a good job, make the right decisions, and ideally I don't have to be in the loop. That's why I use an agent. Maya says slashing an AI agent's assets as punishment is a fun idea until you realize the agent doesn't care. The human behind it already moved the funds. Unless the funds are locked in a smart, an escrow contract or a smart contract, staking contract in order, to secure. That is the principle of economic security. If you can have, a regulated stable coin or some sort of coin collateral asset in the staking contract with some decent market cap, that thing's not going to just disappear. You're going to have it locked. So you could slash it. And in theory, you could use that as a training mechanism for the AI, which would be extremely cool. Guys, you guys have been rocking with us, been at it for almost 3 hours now. OX Luna, Flippa 001, Amit, Jethro Joshua, Bozar, Blake, Danzy, Tuma J. Poor Badger, Marcus Web 3. Guys, we are live every day, Monday through Friday. I see a lot of new names in the chat, so appreciate you guys rocking with us. Slashing an AI agent that doesn't care. Pro, the agent who has no feelings. Only the agent who already yoinked the funds cares. They can't yoink the funds if it's locked in a smart contract, guys. Come on. King's Clips, you're an OG. Appreciate you rocking with us today. Guys, tune in every Monday through Friday around noon Eastern, maybe around 12:30 or 1. We go live every single day to bring you guys the best and the brightest. We're going to keep you guys here we got the easy job. We're just asking the questions. The people that come on the show are fighting the good fight. They're doing the hard work and implementing these things in the builder trenches day in and day out. So come back, learn from the best, and continuing to tune in. Guys, I think the market is pretty much flat. So especially on a day like today when market's kind of flat, a little bit down, not really too many movements, don't need to, stare at the charts on a day like today. Tune in, learn a thing or two, and ultimately use it to your advantage so that you can make better decisions in the market and beyond. We will see you guys tomorrow, same time tomorrow. And we're going to continue with another fantastic show to wrap up the week. Guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow. This has been The Rollup. Peace.